right. Jeff, I loved your Men at Work video.
Oh, thanks.
It was so good. Pulling up all those compilations.
Yeah, they have. I wasn't sure it would be funny. I thought,
it was hilarious.
a few people seem to get the joke, so I'm glad.
Yeah, they have like 6 great songs.
Pretty much. That's pretty much it. You heard those, that's all you need to hear. But
well, there's been some bands. That's why I'm no longer a completist, because there were some bands that I'd be like, man, I have like 4 greatest hits by these people. Like, I'm buying it just because the completist in me. So I just stopped being a completist, you know. No one needs more than 1 greatest hits of Men at Work.
Yeah, I've tried to break that habit. It's hard though, just because once you're a completist, it's hard to rid yourself of that mentality of, there's another one by that band that I've got 6 albums by. I'm going to pick it up.
The only band that I would say that there's a couple: Tom Petty, Tom Waits, and Whitesnake. Those are the 3 bands that I have no idea why Whitesnake has become a completist band for me. I just, I don't know. I say that to myself, like, Whitesnake's got the greatest hits coming out this Friday. And I'm like, do I really need it? I have like every single album,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's sort of like when Iron Maiden comes out with another live album. It's like, totally. Dude, do I need to hear freaking Run to the Hills again? I mean, I love that song, but I don't know.
It's the cover art. Iron Maiden gets you with the cover art, don't they?
They do. Or Iron Maiden puts like 1 new song on there. You're like, I need to buy this because they do, Where the Wild Wind Blows or something live. And you're like, oh, I got to hear that. But
so it's kind of like Yes. Yes, if it's got the Roger Dean cover art, I'm like, well, do I really need it? Is it probably going to be any good? No on both counts, but hey, it's cool artwork. I can't pass that up. And
right.
So I'm going to tell you a story, an Iron Maiden story. I went to the concert and I was like, I had enough money to buy a shirt, and they had an event shirt. So I buy the event shirt, and the girl I was with at the time is like, do you see this event shirt is selling online for like $200? So I said, let me see that. So I took a picture of my seat. I listed it. Within 5 minutes, it sold for $200. So I was like, oh shit. The guy paid me through PayPal. I went back. I bought another event shirt, took a picture, sold it again. I ended up selling like 3 shirts before, like, because they don't let you 1 at a time. They were like, oh, this is an event shirt, 1 per person. And none of them went to Massachusetts. They're all going to like elsewhere in the world, just people that collected Iron Maiden shirts. But I went to like each booth that was selling shirts and bought 1 shirt. Yeah, that's my crazy Iron Maiden story.
Oh,
Josh, you're just a hustler.
You really are.
I'm a little bit of a hustler. Yeah. The only other time I did that at a concert was a Ryan Adams concert, where Ryan Adams had these posters, and 1 out of every 5 was signed. So I bought myself a poster, and I got a signed one. And I looked online, and the poster cost me like $30. And I looked online, and the poster was selling for like $100. So I'm like, that's triple my money. So I said, you know what? I'm going to sell it, and I'll go buy another poster. So I sold it, went to get another poster. It was signed. So I went back to my seat, sold it. Another $100. That was $200. I went back with another poster that was unsigned. I kept it, and that's the poster I have framed. So my poster is something that was free, and I got the $100 per poster for that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's nice when you can come out ahead like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you see the concert?
Yeah, the concert was fantastic.
So did you actually see the concert?
He doesn't need to.
No,
He's just there
conducting business.
This is all during the opening act. I always go to a concert super early.
Oh, the opening act.
Like, yeah.
That's cool.
I like to see the whole event.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, it's like you in their thrift stores buying, videotapes and stuffed animals and stuff like that, just so you can go ahead and flip it. But
yeah, I found 3 laser discs today. I'm not selling them, but each one sells for about $40. They're stone cold mint. I found Fright Night. I found Star Wars, the original one, which is unedited, not like what George Lucas did to it. And I forgot what the other one was, but another 80s movie. I'll have to look. And yeah, but I'm going to keep those. But yeah, so sometimes at thrift stores, you find things. Helps me feed my record collection. For those watching, that's one way that I buy additional records. Is when I go thrifting and I look for records, I look for other items that like toys or something that I could flip and buy records. So,
I used to do that a lot too.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. Well, we're here to talk about 3 genres, 3 of our favorite genres, and we're going to talk about 2 artists. We're going to show 2 artists from each of those genres. And I think as we go around, we're going to start. Brandon will be first, then Chris, then Josh, and then I'll go last. And for the first genre that you show, maybe just explain a bit. Why did you pick that genre? Is it your favorite? How long have you been listening to it? Just kind of a little bit of a backstory about that particular genre for you. And then again, we're going to show 2 artists, 2 of our favorite artists from that genre. So Brandon, do you want to start things off?
I will definitely start things off. Let me grab this here. All right. So the first genre I decided to go with was I decided to do 80s R&B. And really kind of one of the reasons why I decided to do that is I think that's one of the genres that seems to get the least amount of love in the VC. It's just a lot of people don't talk about it, that type of thing. But what I also find too is even the people that do talk about it, it seems like a lot of things in the vinyl world now, that stuff is becoming that much harder to find now. So probably not a good chance there will be a lot of talk about it moving forward. But a lot of groups I can choose out of that particular genre. But the first one I'm going to go with, if I can get the glare out of there, sorry guys, is the Sos Band.
Nice.
Yeah, and for a lot of people that are really into the 80s R&B, like they really are kind of one that really defines that genre and that time period. When we first moved to Missouri, I used to watch BET, a Video Soul, all the time, and it had this little 13-inch black and white TV in my bedroom, and like just that was that time frame that just beat all of that music into my head, and there's just something really kind of nice about it. I love the 80s R&B because there's a lot that's there's just kind of an innocence to it. There was plenty of stuff that was talking about love and this and that, but it was also just kind of like most of it's going to be, for the most part, fairly friendly and not a bunch of, dirty and blah, blah, blah. And so that's one of the things that I really do like about it, is just the smoothness and the innocence of it. And the Sos Band is just kind of the perfect example of that. It's, I won't go through like the band members' names and all of that, but one of the things that really made them unique is that they kind of had a 2 lead singer type of setup with a female and a male. And so in a lot of their songs, they would do things where they would play off of each other. So like if they're going down a scenario, like one of my favorite songs by them is Weekend Girl, which is an absolute fabulous song. And it's basically about this guy who's trying to ask this girl out, and she's like, I don't know, things are kind of busy, that type of thing. But they're kind of taking turns with each verse talking to each other, and both of them are just, awesome vocalists, and just, absolutely represents what was great about that. But so the Sos Band is going to be my first pick. And if you haven't heard of them before, songs like Weekend Girl, No One's Gonna Love You, Tell Me If You Still Care, Just Be Good to Me, like those are like 4 core songs right there that I would recommend checking those out, and that'll let you know right then and there if you should jump into the rest of their catalog. So that's,
but they have a song like Take Your Time or something like that.
Yes, that was kind of like that disco-ish type of hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah. And then also back in the day, and I don't know if people remember this or not, but they also have a song called Just Be Good to Me. And the intro on Just Be Good to Me is what they used to play at the very beginning of all the wrestling at the Chase, when wrestling was just starting to make its way onto regular TV and stuff like that. It always used the intro of that song. So anyone who watched wrestling early back in the day, you know, if you go back and check out the intro to that song, you'd be like, holy cow, that was the SOS Band. I had no idea.
Nice.
So pretty cool. So that's number one. My number two band is going to be for the 80s R&B. It's going to be this one here, and that is Cameo. Definitely one of my, if not my absolute top favorite band from the 80s R&B time frame. Now, most people probably automatically know them from this album, and this is Word Up, because, you know, that song was just played out to death and used in every commercial and everything else, so everybody kind of knows Word Up. But it really was their earlier stuff that really kind of made them what I would say was kind of magical to me. And the best thing I can say about Cameo is that they are the most rock and roll R&B band, especially from the 80s, that was out there, where they didn't stick to a formula. Like you couldn't tell them, you have to have this bass guitar, you have to have this type of groove, you have to have these type of background singers, and that's what R&B is. Cameo was just like, if we hear it and it sounds good, we will mix anything, we will sing it anyway, we'll act silly, we'll be serious, we don't care. We're just making music that we like. And so sometimes things would be like very, very, very funky, like, you know, Parliament, Funkadelic type funky, with songs like Keep It Hot off of this album, like fits right into what Parliament Funkadelic did. Then you also have the more commercial stuff like Word Up that we just talked about. And then some of kind of the sillier or stranger stuff like She's Strange, Alligator Woman. And it was just kind of these really silly, funny type of songs that they used to do. So you just never know what you were going to get with them, except something's going to be funky and fun. And it really made them kind of a special group. And kind of one quick funny story I'll say about that, because this still kind of ticks me off to this day. When I was in college, you know, again, they were just one of my absolute favorite bands. The girl I was dating didn't really know about him, didn't really pay attention to him, and I listened to him and all of that. But she worked for Everlast. You make like all the boxing equipment and all of that.
Yeah.
And so one weekend she comes down and we're hanging out, and she was like, she's just talking about work, and she goes, yeah, I got like this really weird call yesterday where this guy called me up and he said, I need one of those like, you know, those boxer things that they wear to protect their crotch, those big padded things. She's like, he needed one of those and had to get it like right away, and wanted someone to drive it 2 hours to Kansas City because they needed like 2 or 3 of them. And I was like, I'm not going to take the time off to do that. And so we just didn't get it to him. We sent him to another blah, blah, blah. Long story short, it was the band manager for Cameo, and they were performing that night. And they had lost his cups, and that was kind of his little trademark.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she was like, yeah, they told him, if anyone will drive them up, we'll give you backstage passes, we'll give you free tickets, we'll give you. I wanted to strangle her so bad it wasn't even funny. I was like, oh my God, it's like one of my absolute favorite bands. That's the invite, and wasn't even mentioned.
Oh
Man.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And that's why she's your ex.
And that's exactly why she's my ex.
I love it.
So yeah, so those are my two with the 80s R&B.
That's awesome.
Very cool. You know, and I think the thing about Cameo is, you know, people who don't know them think they're a one-hit wonder because of Word Up. And they're like, oh, yeah, they just had that one song. They just had that one album. They don't realize, like, how extensive of a catalog they have. So
yeah,
sometimes, like, having a hit like that is great. But then, on the other hand, that's all people remember you by or know you for, especially if it's not necessarily representative of the rest of your work. And
right. Yeah. That's definitely,
right,
I don't think they ever had any other really hits at all. But yeah, I mean, the band that was around for a long time, 2 or 3 decades of just doing awesome stuff.
Yeah. All right, Chris.
All right, my turn. All right. I'm gonna go with jazz. And jazz was one of the last genres that I got into in terms of music. And I don't know why it took me so long to get into it. I think it's just because it requires a little bit more listening on our part. And, you know, again, most of it is instrumental. So growing up, I was used to just hearing songs with words and things like that. So jazz was one of those, it was almost like the mysterious genre, like what's going to lead to jazz. But I'm going to specifically get into what I call spaced out jazz, because I like all forms of jazz. I mean, I can throw on Miles Davis Kind of Blue, which I consider more of like a traditional jazz album. But then I also, one of my favorite artists is Ornette Coleman, and he's a saxophone player. And I got quite a few of his albums, but this is his 1972 album called Skies of America. And basically what this is, it's Ornette doing his jazz thing, but he's got the London Symphony Orchestra behind him. So it's just the strangest of albums, because sometimes it sounds like a classical album, and then sometimes, you know, you hear Ornette just blaring away on his saxophone in the background, and sometimes it just sounds like this complete disaster, but I love it. Like, that's what I love about Ornette Coleman. He was very, you know, he pushed the jazz envelope. And I mean, this is the stuff that I'm going to show tonight with jazz. You probably wouldn't want to put on. I always say this, you probably wouldn't want to put on at a party, because people are going to leave. Like if you put this on, it doesn't really matter what food you have out at your party. People are going to leave your house. But that's what I love about this stuff. I have another one of his albums called Body Meta, I think is how you pronounce it. This album, on the other hand, this is more funky. So Ornette kind of was playing with the whole jazz fusion thing that Miles was doing, and, you know, Weather Report and, you know, Return to Forever, all those guys. But this is like funky Ornette Coleman. But you can just tell from the illustration on the front, it's just cool music. Yeah, it's really cool music. But I'm going to tell people this, like, if you're just getting into jazz, you probably don't want to start with Ornette Coleman, because he's out there. Like, some of his earlier albums are a little bit more, you know, digestible, but the later stuff, he was out there, which is really cool.
It's kind of like Captain Beefheart of the rock and roll, you know, like what Captain Beefheart is to rock and roll, Ornette Coleman's kind of to jazz.
Definitely. And another artist I'm going to show in the what I call spaced out jazz is Sun Ra. And yes, I have a couple of his albums. This is his album from 1970 something. I'm going to say 1973, called Crystal Spears. And I mean, you right away, you looking at that cover and thinking about the title Crystal Spears, like, this is out there. And I love it. Like, I the other reason I chose jazz tonight is because I haven't listened to jazz in a while. I think I'm going to have to spin a lot of these. This is just spaced out, like keyboard. It's almost like traveling through space and recording what that sounds like. I mean, that's what Sun Ra is. Sun Ra, I like artists a lot. I like artists that push the envelope. And Sun Ra definitely does that. Now, here's the thing, though. I just picked this album up last year by Sun Ra. This is called Omniverse. This is a reissue. Now, this is a little bit more accessible. Like, I thought this was really going to be spaced out, but when I put it on, it sounds like almost like a traditional jazz album. So Sun Ra, there he is right there. Sun Ra, you know, obviously did some more accessible stuff as well. But yeah, I don't know. I like the spaced out stuff. That's why I like what Miles was doing in the 70s, like with Bitches Brew. And, you know, I can't even think of another album right now where he was spaced out. It'll come to me. But yeah, Sun Ra and Ornette Coleman definitely fit the bill.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Josh, you got any comments that you want to read or respond to?
So far, just mostly people saying hi. But Gazin says that his favorites are Clifford Brown and Duke Ellington.
Nice.
Great choices for jazz. But other than that, it's mostly people just saying, hey, guys, things like that.
With jazz, a lot of times with jazz, I go for the jazz fusion. And I think that's what, I'll mention Aaron right now because I know, Aaron's just starting to get into jazz. And I sent him Return to Forever, which is a band with Al Di Meola on guitar. And Al Di Meola played with Miles Davis. But it's more guitar driven. And I think that was what is cool about jazz fusion. So jazz fusion is almost like the gateway to other jazz.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, both of those are two great artists there, man. It's I mean, like I said, Ornette Coleman's Twins is probably my favorite album by him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as opposed to his early stuff, which is great, I totally agree. It's like the more he got into his spacey type of stuff, there was just something that just really touched your soul with him. I mean, just and then Sunra, the exact same thing. That dude was just a freak. But he made some amazing music.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of he created his own musical theory. I'm looking at the back here. It's called harmolodic or harmonic theory. Like he created that shit. Like this guy, he was like a mad scientist of jazz. And yeah, it's just spaced out, but in a good way.
Yeah, they interviewed one of his band members, a guy that played with him one time, and he talked about how he was sometimes very difficult to deal with. Yeah, because we'd be playing these weird things where you're not, in a regular groove or whatever, and he would have us there for hours and hours and hours and hours drilling over the same little part of that song, and we couldn't figure out what is he looking for.
Right.
And just talked about how he was in his own world, like on his own level.
And here's one more thing, and then I'll I know it's Josh's turn, but I think what's good about albums like this, and we all have albums that are we'll just call them strange. I call them palate cleansers because I think I like regular, I'm just going to call it regular music. Like I love to listen to a song like, Madonna, Like a Prayer, or, I'm going to say Cyndi Lauper because I know Brandon was talking about Cyndi Lauper, Time After Time. Like I like hearing a song, but every once in a while, I think it's like I need to clear my mind and listen to something crazy so that I can go back to that other stuff. So I consider it like music, like a palate cleanser sometimes, some of these strange bands.
Great way to look at it.
That's good.
By the way, Angel says he's just getting into jazz and he's starting with the Miles Davis Kind of Blue Mo-Fi, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's a really good choice. And Gazin says that he does like Steely Dan and they are kind of jazzy.
Yeah.
So there you go. Great choices, guys. And I do have some odd choices that I'm going to show you tonight later on, but kind of go along with your spacey palate cleansing music, Chris. I
think what's funny, Josh, is I know you mentioned before you did this, like you didn't want to show Tom Petty, you didn't want to show Lucero or Lana Del Rey. And I was like, I don't want to show Black Flag and Johnny Cash and all the bands I talk about. So I tried to pick some different stuff.
Yeah, me too. And I think that for the most part, the bands I'm going to show tonight are different. The next one is inspired by you, Jeff, because for those that are just watching, Jeff has recently got into Faster Pussycat, which I think is an awesome band, which I'm so excited about. And I'm sending you a Faster Pussycat record, which you should have any day. So I wanted to pick two hard rock albums that are really hard rock albums, much in the line of Faster Pussycat or, even AC/DC or Black Crowes. There's blues influence to them. If they didn't come out in the 80s and get looped into all that other music, they probably would have had a great career. But unfortunately, it came out in the late 80s where that music was kind of, I don't know. There was definitely some sort of crusade against this type of music. And the first one is a band called Johnny Crash, not Johnny Cash, Johnny Crash. This album is called Neighborhood Threat. Now, this album is not easy to find, but it's not expensive. So I think that I paid $25 for it, but it took me a long time to get it. It's, your typical AC/DC blues inspired rock. Now, they don't sound like AC/DC. The vocals aren't like Brian Johnson. So I don't want you to think of that, but the music is just hard rocking, awesome 80s rock. And I have no doubt that all of you would love this. I have no doubt that an Angel would love this. There's no doubt about that. Looking at Angel's Instagram and conversing with him. It's just great music. So if you see this in the store, I totally recommend it. Even if it's on cassette, buy it. Johnny Crash, Neighborhood Threat. And very similar is a band called Johnny Law. I know the two Johnnies. Aaron calls this his two favorite Johnnies, but I would have to admit that I like Johnny Cash more than both of these. But now this one might freak you out because it's on Metal Blade, and you're probably thinking, okay, I'm going to get some heavy stuff. Quite the contrary. This is kind of like Shaker Moneymaker. That's how heavy it gets, right? It's not heavy at all. It's not, I wouldn't even consider this heavy metal. It's like Rolling Stones, maybe a tinge of Social Distortion, that type of punk rock energy, but rock and roll songs. Awesome. Both of these, Johnny Crash had one more album, but it was like 10 years later. And I think they got Matt Sorum and a couple celebrities to play on it. So, but in terms of their heyday, both these bands just had one album, Johnny Crash, Johnny Law. I recommend them. Both are cheap, but hard to find. But if you wait on Discogs long enough, you probably get both of these for $20 each. Hopefully.
I love those obscure, let's just call them hard rock, heavy metal bands from the late 80s, early 90s. And there's so many of them. It's because, I think all these labels wanted to just sign all these bands. And, so many of them made great albums, but they never reached like The Warrant or Poison or Slaughter or, Faster Pussycat, Height. But they really made some great albums. So I think you're right, Josh, like seeking some of these out for somebody who likes that style of music, they're going to love that stuff.
Right. Like the Lord Tracy that I kind of forced you to, right. It's fantastic. But most people are like, does that have anything to do with Tracy Lords? It's like,
well, it's like the band Kick Tracy. Kick Tracy made some good stuff.
Oh, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you got to feel bad for like bands who were inspired by Motley Crue and Poison and Faster Pussycat and those, I don't want to call them hair metal bands, but you know what I'm talking about, like the hard rock bands from the 80s. And then it's like, I got my band together, we're going to put out a record. And then all of a sudden grunge hits and there's not a market for it anymore. And you're just kind of like, oh shit. All right, now what do we do? Nobody wants to hear this stuff. And, I imagine there were a lot of bands like that where it's just sort of like, oh crap, kind of like when disco died in the early 80s. It's like, oh shit, now what do we do? But
yeah, but what happened is you got a lot of good albums that people don't even know about, like Winger. I know Aaron will talk about this. They have an album called Pull, which is kick-ass. And Warrant has an album called Dog Eat Dog, which is amazing too. So like these bands sort of morphed into like heavier stuff, and they came out with some really good albums.
Right. And I think that, look at it. Tonight starts the stadium tour where Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Poison, Joan Jett are on tour. I think there is a resurgence of this music. And I think that, the stigma, like when I talk to my son and he's like, so Dad, grunge came out and it just completely killed this music. I said, no. I said, everybody I knew still listened to Motley Crue and Pearl Jam and Nirvana. What ended up happening was the record companies decided that they were no longer going to pay to have these songs played on the radio. That's what ends up happening. Is payola is real. We all know it's real. We know that the program directors are paid to play this music. And they banded together and said, no longer play this, play this. These are the bands we want you to play. and Alice in Chains and Nirvana and Soundgarden. Those are all great bands, but everybody I knew was still listening to Motley Crue, was still listening to Van Halen, was still listening to all these other bands. They just weren't great. Yeah.
All right. Well, Chris showed his jazz, like space jazz, and I'm going to show jazz fusion since you talked about it. That was one of the genres that I was going to show. First band I want to show is Weather Report, and this is their album Heavy Weather. And I liken jazz fusion. It's almost like the progressive rock of jazz. Where there's not so much vocals, but you've definitely each song takes you on a journey from start to finish, and there's different movements, and there's a lot of virtuoso playing and just really impressive musicianship on a lot of these records. Jaco Pastorius is one of my favorite not only jazz bass guitarists but just bass guitarists in general. He kind of really kind of established the whole fretless bass, playing, which I think subsequently influenced artists like Sting. But yeah, it's, I don't know if jazz fusion may be a good starting point if you're looking to get into jazz. This album, I think, came out in like the late 70s, like maybe 78 or something like that. But, if you like Steely Dan, I think this would probably be up your alley. So I really like that. Another artist that I really like is Pat Metheny, the Pat Metheny group. I love this one. And Pat Metheny, for those who don't know, he's a great jazz guitarist. Started with his band in the late 70s, but this is it's mellow jazz, but it's interesting to listen to because he's got world rhythms that he uses. He's got like a vocalist who doesn't sing, and it's not quite scatting, but he almost kind of like sings almost like his voice is like an instrument. Listening to this, but it just puts me in it's melancholy music to some extent, but it puts me in a great mood to listen to it. And I kind of what got me into this, I love like Sting, like his Dream of the Blue Turtles album. I love music like that. I love Steely Dan. Just kind of, it's along those lines, and great guitarist, but it's sort of like smooth jazz in a way. It's jazz fusion, but it's also a bit of smooth jazz. This is another great album. This is Still Life Talking, also from the late 80s. But it's very much progressive rock, but really kind of progressive jazz. And I can't say enough about Pat Metheny. He's one of my favorite jazz artists, composers, and, reminds me a lot of Weather Report as well. But, I think if you like Chick Corea, you like Pat Metheny, the band you were talking about, Chris, that you played for Aaron. You got Aaron that record.
Oh yeah, Return to Forever.
Yeah, it's right along those lines.
Well, I love Weather Report. Weather Report is such a great band, and they've done so many different styles of jazz. Like I know their first couple albums were a little bit more experimental and avant-garde, and then I think by the time they got to Heavy Weather, they're a little bit more commercial. Because isn't the song Birdland on there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Birdland was like their big hit.
Yeah.
But yeah, Weather Report is a killer band.
Yeah, their later albums are definitely more accessible.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of wanting to put your toe in the water, I think some of those late, that one, Heavy Weather would definitely be one to grab if you're just not sure. And you can find them super cheap. I mean, they're not expensive.
Yeah.
They're not like looking for a Miles Davis or John Coltrane album. You can find them for like $5 or $6 probably, but
right.
Definitely worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing.
Right. Jeff, we have a bunch of comments. You want me to read some?
Yeah.
So we definitely have a lot more people on right now. Angel said he wanted to thank Aaron for showing him obscure bands like Dirty Look, Sweet FA, Tough, Awesome stuff that he totally missed out on. Tuscadero, who's an awesome sub, said that he says, so cynical. Same thing happened with grunge. Some really great bands come from Seattle just a little later than the big boys, and then it just wasn't as cool to be a band from Seattle. Yeah, you're totally right. Think about Screaming Trees kind of got washed over just because of the way they looked, or a band like Grunt Truck, right? So many great bands. And Brian was catching up with the chat. He said that he recommended John Coltrane's Central Park West. Even if you think you won't like jazz, it's on the album Coltrane Sound. Gazin loves your pick, Jeff. He's a great one, Jeff. Prime Analog Records should check out Steely Dan's Aja. That's how you say it, right? Aja.
Great album. Yeah.
Yeah, great album. Then Brian says, if you like Weatherport, then give, I hope I don't mispronounce this, Mana Shavu Orchestra.
Oh, Mahavishnu.
Mahavishnu? Okay,
Yeah.
I apologize. Mahavishnu Orchestra. And return to favorite bands. Give those bands a listen, which is awesome. Kyle, I'm going to try to see what I can do for a copy of Johnny Crash for you. Prime Analog Records, Jacko is the man. Jacko is the man. And there is such a great documentary on him if you guys haven't seen it. He said, get the Columbia half-speed version of Heavy Weather. Also on the Pat Metheny, check out Bright Size Life, which has Jacko playing bass. And Jacko is just got to be, he was the greatest bassist, right? Besides maybe Cliff Burton. He's probably better than Cliff Burton, right?
But I would say he's just different. I don't know if he's better.
He's just different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is his first solo album. This is a great one to get if you like Jaco Pastorius. One of my favorite all-time jazz songs, Portrait of Tracy. It's just a solo bass jazz piece. It's just phenomenal. I mean, this guy was brilliant, and such an innovative bass guitar player too. I mean, nobody sounded like him back then, and now everybody sounds like him. But
yeah, I want to say a couple things. Jaco Pastorius also played on quite a few Joni Mitchell records when Joni went jazz. And the other thing I want to talk about Mahavishnu Orchestra for a second. The guitarist for Mahavishnu Orchestra is John McLaughlin, and John McLaughlin played with Miles Davis. John McLaughlin, like if you like Hendrix, you would love John McLaughlin. This guy is a heavy freaking guitar player. And Mahavishnu Orchestra, like they're a heavy freaking band. So like if you like Hendrix and jazz fusion, definitely check out Mahavishnu Orchestra.
And one of my favorite albums is Friday Nights in San Francisco of any genre of music. And that's John McLaughlin's on there. And it's just three guitars shredding acoustically. But man, I love that album. I love that album so much I bought it for Aaron. Because I was like,
when Angel says Donald Fagen's The Nightfly, yes, I love The Nightfly. And in fact, he just came out with a live. He plays the entire Nightfly album live. And it sounds phenomenal. I love that record. I love it as much as I love Steely Dan Gaucho, which is the album that came right before that. But yeah, agreed. Prime Analog talks about Lyle Mays. Absolutely, Lyle Mays was such a great vocalist. I mean, he is as much a part of Pat Metheny's sound as Michael Anthony is a part of Van Halen's sound, where just that vocal, it's just so much a part of what made Van Halen great, what made Van Halen, and same for Lyle Mays with Pat Metheny group. Absolutely.
Jeff, with Pat Metheny, are you familiar with the album What's It's All About that came out in 2011, I think 2012?
No, I'm not.
Yeah, because that's one of his later ones that I think doesn't get as much attention as his earlier stuff, because I mean his earlier stuff is so fantastic. But I think arguably that's probably become my favorite Pat Metheny album. And I think the thing that's so great about it is it's basically just him. You know, there's not a big supporting cast, and it's recorded in a way where like you're really, really in the room with him, just with his acoustic guitar. You can hear his fingers sliding up and down the frets, and everything is just so bright and shimmery. And he's doing stuff like covers of Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel and a number of others on that album. So a really, really good one to check out that just seems to go under the radar for Metheny.
Yeah, I'll have to, what was it called again?
It's called, it's what's it all about, or what is it all about? So something like that, but it's from 2011, I think.
Because I think he's got an album called One Quiet Night, which is the same idea. It's just him and his guitar. He doesn't have like a full band behind him. So if it's anything like that, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in checking that out. Brandon, it's your turn next. What genre do you have?
Okay. Well, actually, I picked a couple just in case there was some doubling. So we've been doing a lot of jazz. I'm going to go ahead and skip my jazz. And I'm going to go with kind of classical and opera.
Wow.
You know, again, just kind of some genres that we don't talk about as much in the VC overall. So the first one I'm going to go with here is, and actually, I guess it's kind of glaring there. It's Carl Orff's Carmina Burana. I can never pronounce that thing right. My lips don't work with it. And of course, you know, there's so many different symphonies and orchestras that perform. So, I mean, that's kind of actually irrelevant, but it's just that piece of work by Carl Orff is definitely one of my top three when it comes to the whole just classical genre in general. It's actually a pretty common one. I think oftentimes when people hear it for the first time, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that from that show, that movie, that type of thing. It's just one of those very, very big, powerful type of pieces that you associate with, you know, gladiator movies and things of that nature. And I don't know, it's just one of those ones that I never get tired of listening to. I mean, I don't remember exactly what year he wrote this. He was born like the late 1890s and died, you know, kind of in the mid to late 1900s. But yeah, it's just a really, really fantastic piece, you know, gigantic choir, just powerful and that type of thing. I actually had a chance to hear the St. Louis Symphony perform this live one time. And it's just like when you get in a hall like that and say you have 100-piece choir and just it was one of the most amazing things. And one of those kind of pieces too, that kind of shows you the evolution of, like, for lack of better terms, kind of where metal came from. When you think about, you know, just like the power and the energy and the bigness, if you will, of that music. And this to me just really feels like that was metal for the 1800s, kind of thing, early 1900s. So just a really, really fantastic piece. And again, I'm sorry it's not showing up too well there, but you know, a lot of different orchestras perform it. I probably have like 5 or 6 different pressings performed by different orchestras. And the last one I'll kind of show there is just Pavarotti. I guess we're kind of going more to the opera side of things as opposed to classical, but falls under the same category for me. And again, it's one of those names that I think most of us kind of know about, and everyone recognizes the name, maybe doesn't recognize the music as much. But sometimes you really have to take some time just to sit down and listen and dive into what he does, because it's hard to ever see if you can find a more powerful voice just in the world of music. Just the amount of force that he can project with his voice. It's easy to see why he was, you know, just the tenor that everyone just kind of freaked out about. And you know, my absolute favorite song by him was his Nessa Dorma. It's just, again, just one of those pieces that you listen to and it just really kind of floors you. So I don't have a ton in the classical area. I mean, my Yo-Yo Ma, things like that I kind of love, but those are two that I definitely don't get tired of listening to at all.
Nice.
So,
but yeah, I really don't have much classical at all, Brandon. So one day when we hang out, you're gonna have to blow my mind so I can dive into that genre.
Definitely. I mean, there's sometimes there was some orchestra from China or something like that. Again, came and performed at a local college, and I went and saw it, and it was absolutely fantastic. And I was there with a couple of friends, and we're listening to it, and they got into this thing, and I was like, "Holy cow, that's Slayer South of Heaven." I was like, "That is exactly what it is," and it's little moments like that that kind of drew me into like saying, "Hey, you need to pay more attention to what these guys were doing."
And now the heavy metal bands are getting with orchestras. You got Metallica, you got Kiss,
right?
You know, all these bands are playing with orchestras now. So
Yeah,
Exactly, exact same concept. So, but yeah, so those are my two for that genre.
Awesome.
all right, Chris.
wow, I got to follow classical music. Brandon is like he's like classing things up here.
You got to follow the dollar bin. That's all you got to do. That's what
All
it's
right,
called.
well, I'm going from classical to metal. Let's do some metal. All right, here we go. The first band I'm going to show, a band that should be talked about more, Armored Saint. And Armored Saint, I got a couple albums I'm going to show you. These were just reissued a few months ago, I want to say. Armored Saint was a band I really didn't listen to a lot when I was a kid, but I'm listening to them now and I'm like, geez, they make some great, this is just straight up heavy metal.
Yeah.
You got John Bush on vocals. John Bush went on to be in Anthrax. So this is, pre-Anthrax. This is their album, Raising Fear. And there are the guys there. I mean, you can just see what you're going to get. And I also have their album Delirious Nomad, which is really good too. And again, this is just straight up heavy metal, no apologies, sort of like Twisted Sister meets Wasp, just sort of that vein of metal. And John Bush has a great voice. I mean, I didn't always like him, and I'm sorry for anybody who likes John Bush and Anthrax. I like John Bush and Anthrax, but I wasn't always the biggest fan of him in Anthrax. I like him actually better in Armored Saint. I think he fit the music a little bit better.
Yeah.
I mean, how are you going to follow Joey Belladonna? You know what I mean? Yeah. Joey Belladonna was like, he was like a bird with his singing, you know? And John Bush had that more gravelly, thing to his voice. And I think it worked, but I like him better in Armored Saint. And the other band I'm going to talk about, let's go new wave British heavy metal here. The Mighty Saxon.
Yes.
And this is their, I mean, if there ever was a heavy metal anthem, Denim and Leather is that anthem. You've got Biff Byford on vocals, and Saxon should have been as big as Maiden. Saxon made a shitload of records. I saw them live. They're still making albums. They still sound phenomenal. I also have a live album by them. I just pulled out a couple. This is The Eagle Has Landed live, and they sound as good live as they do in the studio. But there were so many bands that came out of that new wave of British heavy metal that a lot of people don't even know about. Like, a lot of times we go to the Maidens and we go, even Def Leppard was considered new wave of British heavy metal. But there was Tigers of Pantang, and Motorhead can kind of be considered new wave of British heavy metal too. But my point is that if you like Maiden, branch out, do some research, because there's other new wave of British heavy metal bands that are just as good.
Angel Witch,
yes.
Angel Witch. But you know what? I think John Bush was needed because in the 90s, music had changed so much.
Yeah.
That I think that, even though, he might be better with Armored Saint, Joey might be better with Anthrax. I know that the debate lives on, but I think that he was a good fit. And he let Anthrax continue through the 90s.
And I agree with you. And I think the band that changed things for a lot of people was Pantera. Because Pantera came along and they had more of a groove aspect to their metal and more of like a street like sound to it. Like you didn't want to hear those high pitched vocals anymore. You're right, Josh. So I think Anthrax brought in John Bush. I think they started to get a little bit more groove to their music. And I think everybody was sort of following that Pantera thing.
How could you not be influenced by Pantera? And I know some people, it's like revisionist history. Some people will be like, oh, they're overrated. But if you go back to 1991, 92, 93, 94, they were the biggest heavy metal band. They were enormous, and they were heavy.
Yeah, and most people don't know that they started out as a glam metal band.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Great picks, buddy.
Yeah, and I think that it's really key what you're saying about Pantera there, because when you think about where metal was going at that time, there weren't a lot of other places to make it go faster and louder and kind of take it to the next level. And Pantera just figured out how to do that by adding the groove to it. So yeah, it's impossible to deny the impact that Pantera had.
Well, and look at this. I think the last time I talked with you guys, Brandon, didn't you show Slayer, Diabolus, and Musica?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a perfect example of a band copying Pantera. Slayer copied what Pantera was doing.
Yeah.
And not only that, Chris, when they did the Big Four concerts, Metallica was the headliner. Slayer was underneath it. Now, during the 80s, all of us know that Anthrax and Megadeth were more popular than Slayer. But what happened was Pantera was the heaviest album to reach number one at that time. People were kind of like, well, I like that. What else is heavy? And around 2000, Slayer came out, 2001 actually, came out 9/11, 2001. Slayer came out with an album, God Hates Us All. And I remember seeing all these young kids wearing Slayer shirts. And I'm like, holy shit, Slayer is popular again. Like, I always loved Slayer, but heavy music, Pantera really helped with heavy music becoming more popular.
Well, I think another thing too, and I don't want to go off on the Slayer thing here, but I love Slayer, by the way. Slayer stuck to their guns.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't freaking make I think Diabolus, I think Kerry King said that Diabolus was their turbo. Like it was their album where they sort of experimented, but it was still freaking heavy. Like Slayer, Overkill, Testament, all those bands stuck to their guns. You know, unlike Metallica.
Some other. Yeah.
Yeah, very true.
So guys, my next genre of music, I don't know what kind of genre it is. I picked two artists that cannot be encapsulated in one genre. The best way I could describe it is they freak my girlfriend out. Both of these artists absolutely freak my girlfriend out. When I play them, she's like, oh no. Like you could just see she gets like this wave of fear. The first artist is Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
Nice.
The man, the myth, the legend, the god.
I have that album.
Nice.
Yeah, he is a god. Just fantastic. I don't know how to describe it. You know, Chris was talking earlier about palate cleansers. I certainly search for music that is going to like I've never heard it before. You know, like I enjoy pop music, and I think that's what Chris was trying to say with Madonna or Cyndi Lauper. Like the older I get, the more I can appreciate a good pop song. You know, like Blurred Lines came on the radio today, and Landon's in the back seat and he's dancing, and I'm thinking, like, here's a pop song that took the nation by storm, right? It takes talent to write a song like that, but it also takes talent to write something so avant-garde that, you know, is going to kind of make you have to listen, like, because it doesn't follow any formulaic. And you, as you know, Chris, if you have this album, you know, it's strange.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, Josh. I know why you like him, because he brings a heavy metal aspect. He's a showman.
He's a showman. There's no doubt about it. And he's got a unique way of using his voice as an instrument, which leads me to my next artist, and that is Tom Waits, my favorite artist of all time. And a lot of people ask me, why is Tom Waits your favorite artist of all time? And I think that there is three different Tom Waits. There is Tom Waits from the early 70s to around 1979. And that is the Tom Waits that is very much a singer-songwriter, piano, gravelly voice. His early albums his first two albums have a much more digestible voice, but the lyrics are there. So for instance, like on here, this album, he's got a song called On the Nickel, and it's just about like two homeless people living on Fifth Street, you know, that's on the nickel is what they call it. but the clever wordplay and the music just always resonates with me. It's like Springsteen. When Springsteen tells a story, it sucks you right in. But then in the 80s, with albums like, the most popular albums like Rain Dogs, but all of his albums in the 80s, they were more inspired by like Captain Beefheart. They were super avant-garde and weird and strange and mixed circus music and pirate music and drunken lullabies and it was so odd, and every song was so different. I really love it, and it's so completely different than the 70s. And then when he got into the 90s and the 2000s, he took elements of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s and blended together. Some people say it's even stranger, but to me, like, you listen to an album like this, and he's got a song called Picture in a Frame, which I think is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. It's been covered by Eddie Vedder, been covered by Bruce Springsteen, been covered by lots of artists. And it's basically just saying, I'm going to love you till the wheels come off. I've loved you since I put your picture in a frame. Kind of like just an old man saying, like, that's, he started dating this girl. They took a picture somewhere together. He put it in a frame. And at that moment, since that moment, he's known that it's the love of his life. So there are amazing lyrics. It appeals to the hopeless romantic in me. But then he's got a song called Chocolate Jesus, where it's like, he thought, like, well, what about when people can't go to church? Maybe they could just get like a chocolate Jesus, and that would show their love for God. And it's like, he thinks of these crazy things, and it's like, that's what I love about him. So yeah, so Tom Waits and Screaming Jay Hawkins, and they do have a connection. Screaming Jay Hawkins does an awesome version of Whistling Past the Graveyard, the Tom Waits classic. So I love both these artists. Both of them scare the hell out of my girlfriend.
And I want to ask you something about Tom Waits, because I know I don't really know too much about Tom Waits. I have a few of the CDs, but his first few albums, he was singing in a normal voice, almost like if you were to go to a bar at like 2 a.m, like the guy singing for you was Tom Waits. Why did he change his voice over time to get more gravelly and almost like monster-like?
He created a character. He was acting, even though he was probably an alcoholic at that point. Like, he created this vagabond character, and if you watch like interviews with him, you'll see he's quite funny, but he started to realize that character was going to kill him, because he was really living it all day, being that alcoholic, being that drunk, going cigarette to cigarette to cigarette. But I think that he wanted to use his voice as an instrument, didn't want to have just a plain ordinary voice. He loved Lightning Hopkins, and in his Hall of Fame speech, Tom Waits mentions that he went saw Lightning Hopkins when he was a kid in concert, and he snuck backstage, and there was a sign that said, "Keep out, entertainers only." And that's what inspired him to become an entertainer, was that that idea of like, oh, here's this guy Lightning Hopkins that he adored, but to be able to meet him, he had to play some sort of instrument. The great thing about Tom Waits, if you listen to him live, he tells these stories in between the songs, and they really resonate. Like the song Burma Shave is about how driving down the highway, they used to have these Burma Shave signs in the 50s, these advertising signs to catch your eye. But he took that song Burma Shave as a metaphor, where this guy meets this girl and they're both trying to get out. And he says, "I'm going to Burma Shave," which is like just a metaphor of like, I'm going where the highway leads, right? We're going to get out of here. And they end up getting in an accident. But what makes me love Tom Waits is he says this line in this song where he looks over at the girl and she goes, she put her feet up on the dash. She looked at him and said, Marysville isn't anything but a wide spot in the road. Sometimes my heart just pounds like thunder. I don't understand why it doesn't explode. And to me, as a teenager hearing that, I was like, oh, I feel that. Like sometimes like I feel that passion of just living. Like I remember just living, escaping my parents' house, living on my own, experiencing these things for the first time. That's what I get out of that song, you know. So when I hear Marysville ain't nothing but a wide spot in the road, sometimes my heart pounds like thunder. I don't know why it doesn't explode. The older you get, the less you feel that, because you've experienced life so much. But the next time, you know, you do experience that, hold on to it, because it's rare, you know. So that's why I love Tom Waits, and it's awesome.
That's cool, man.
You want to catch us up on the comments, Josh? Is there anything that we haven't?
Let's see. So unfortunately, Royce got a box of albums from storage that were all stuck together, which sucks. And Ernesto said Slayer called it quits way too early in their career, which I totally agree with. But I don't think Tom wanted to tour anymore. So Roy says there was a Saxon in there in his, yes, he peeled them apart, painful. The magic vinyl cleaner helped. And Music in the House said gargled glass and smoked a lot. Which I'm assuming is Tom Waits' voice. So yes. All right, Music in the House cracked me up.
And the other thing I think that has to be acknowledged about what you were saying with Screaming Jay Hawkins is the fact that I think sometimes it's easy to forget when he was doing what he was doing. You know, there weren't a lot of examples, if you will, of people kind of leading the way, like an Alice Cooper or something like that, showing him how to go down that path. I mean, his first album was like in the late 50s and going into the 60s. I mean, that took a lot of cojones to do what he was trying to do at that point in time, because nobody else was doing it.
Yeah, and being an African American,
exactly.
You know, you think about that, like, you know, they were, you know, most of the African American artists were trying to wear suits and portray themselves as just like good old wholesome as they possibly could be, because that's what they wanted to obviously be recognized. Screaming Jay Hawkins just was like, this is who I am. I love it. You know, it's right. It took a lot of guts.
And put it in that context too, that like when you had Sam Cooke and other artists like that, which of course we think are some of the most wholesome artists that are out there. It's like even when Sam first started doing music, he was sneaking off away from the church to do the music that he was doing, because even that was considered like, no, you do not do secular music, not in the Black community. It's gospel, it's church, it's nothing else. So if a Sam Cooke had to hide what he was doing, like you were just saying, like how far was Hawkins putting himself out there to openly do what he was doing? Like that takes guts, man.
It takes a tremendous amount of guts. What a great talent. I do know someone that has a full back tattoo of Screaming Jay Hawkins. So
awesome.
He definitely influenced. And like you said, there would be no Alice Cooper, you know, Marilyn Manson, all these people that are shock rock. He came first. No
exactly.
Doubt. Yep.
And I think and I'll put Little Richard in that category as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Little Richard, fantastic, right? Yeah. Like unbelievable. I saw Little Richard in concert. He was incredible way back in the day.
So
it was like one of those festivals.
With the tattoo, is it Roger from PSR?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It's this guy Tim. He's an artist, and he's unbelievable. He's like, want to see my new tattoo? He took off his shirt. His entire back is Screaming Jay Hawkins. Like, that is incredible, dude.
I just want to say one thing before Jeff goes. I feel like each of us we're in high school and we're giving a report on something, because like when Josh was done, he's like, and that is why I like Tom Waits.
Exactly. I have to explain it sometimes. I wish I could record Michelle's face when she walks in a room and, you know, Tom Waits is on, or Screaming Jay Hawkins. It's like,
well, Josh, you get an A on your report. You got an A.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You know what's so funny is we were in the basement today, and Landon's like, let's play some Kiss. And I said, Landon, if I don't put on Bobby Brown or Belle Biv DeVoe, or I said, your mom is not going to talk to me. She's done with Kiss for the
day. All right. Well, the genre that I am going to go with is Jangle Pop.
Wow.
It was started by the Byrds, kind of that folk rock movement. Their first two albums Mr. Tambourine Man, which is actually where the term Jangle Pop started. It was a Bob Dylan composition, but it's got that line, the jingle jangle morning, I'll come following you. But it's, defined by the 12-string Rickenbacker, that ringing sound. The Beatles used it pretty heavily on A Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale. A great example of it is the song If I Needed Someone, that George Harrison song. So it was popularized by the Byrds, and then in the 80s it kind of had a revitalization. The first artist that I'm going to show, I've never talked to anybody who's ever heard of this band before. They don't even have a Wikipedia page. That's how obscure this band is. I looked it up. I'm like, come on, how could this band not have a Wikipedia page? But I'm talking about E-I-E-I-O. This is their debut album, Land of Opportunity. And it's, I would say, I was going to talk about REM as a great example of a Jangle Pop band. The Smiths, to some extent, were Jangle Pop. But for this album is, it reminds me a lot. This would be like the third Byrds album after Turn, 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 if they hadn't gone in that psychedelic direction with, Fifth Dimension. This is almost like the third Byrds album. It reminds me, like of the first REM album a little bit, but just great, 3-minute pop songs, a little bit of a country twang to it, but great harmonies, great, just a tight little band. And they only have 2 albums. They got this one, and then they put out another one, That Love Thing, which is not, you can find it for about $12 on eBay. I looked it up today, but check it out if you like Jangle Pop, if you like early REM, if you like the Byrds, if you like the Beatles, 1964, early 1965, that whole Rickenbacker, jangly, kind of bright pop. This is a great album to get. And then the second band that I'm going to talk about is Guadalcanal Diary, another great Jangle Pop band, pretty much cut from the same cloth. Reminds me a little bit of the Smithereens. They got a little bit more of a bite to them, a little bit, they rock a little bit harder than E-I-E-I-O does. Not so much the country kind of twang that you get with E-I-E-I-O, but still a great album. My favorite album by them is 2x4, which this would have made a great punk album cover. But they do a cover of And Your Bird Can Sing, not on this album, but they do a cover of it. I think it's a B-side. But Litany Life Goes On. It's just great, mid 80s alternative new wave Jangle Pop, like the male Bangles or Smithereens, if you're familiar with any of their early stuff, REM, kind of the same deal. They just never made it all that, never made it all that famous. Not many people have heard of them, know who they are, but singers have very distinctive voices as well. But that's...
No, are those albums hard to find, like the E-I-E-I-O and stuff?
The E-I-E-I-O is I'm surprised I found that one out in the wild. It's not impossible to find, and they're not expensive if you do find them. You might have to seek them out on Discogs or eBay. Guadalcanal Diary I've seen here and there. They've got 4 albums. They actually originated in Marietta, Georgia, which, REM was from Athens, Georgia. The B-52s were also from Georgia. So, I think you get a lot of Jangle Pop coming out of that region of the United States for whatever reason. But you can find them, and they're not expensive because nobody knows who they are. But
well, how did you hear of them?
A friend of mine had this Guadalcanal Diary. She had one of their cassettes, and then in college, they were kind of big, one of those college radio, bands that you would hear only on the college station. So I remember hearing them in college. E-I-E-I-O, I read a review in Rolling Stone for one of their albums, and then I picked up, I think it was a CD. I think I got it on CD first, and then I found the vinyl. But Yeah, I like it. It's really, I can't understand why they didn't make it bigger than they did, because the music is great.
Cool.
Yeah, I've never heard of either one of them, so I definitely have to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm adding it to my Apple Music, brother.
Yeah.
All right.
Very cool.
Great. All right.
Right.
Your last and final genre, Brandon.
Last and final genre. I'm going old school hip hop for the last and final genre.
Nice.
And old school meaning anything from 1990 or I guess 89, you say, or back. Okay, so that's what I'm kind of defining as old school here. So the first one I'm going to go with is going to be this one here, which is Too Short. One of the biggest names, I think, in kind of the old school hip hop. One of the biggest names kind of in hip hop, but still for some reason just doesn't seem, or never has seemed to have gotten, I guess maybe the recognition that he deserves, except within the world of hip hop. But he was kind of one of those ones early on that really, really established a very, very distinct style, a very distinct delivery. And it's just one of those things where as soon as you hear any song, you automatically know that's Too Short, you know? And so I guess it's really kind of hard to even describe a lot of other things about him. But
tall
about this tall. That's what it looks like, about that tall. So yeah, this from 1998. This is his album Born to Mac. It was kind of the first one that I was introduced to. And there's this song on there. It's like a 8 or 9 minute song called Freaky Tales. And it was one of those ones where like the whole song, he's just talking about all of these girls that he's known. I mean, he lists like 20 something girls' names, and he's just rapping these little stories about them. And I remember the first time my friends and I kind of heard that, it was kind of the early days of some of the dirtier stuff. And it was just one of those like, oh my gosh, he said what? And just, you know, and he was so known too for his, the bass beats within his music. Like he never had I should say never had, in most cases, a big part of his style was, I'm the tape that you put in when you're cruising the boulevard trying to break your back window with, you know, 4 12-inch subwoofers beating down your trunk. And there was nobody, at least where I grew up, all of us that were driving around in our $1,000 cars with our $2,000 stereo systems in the back. Yeah, everyone had a Too Short tape in their car at some point in time. You just had to have it. And that's what he was known for. So yeah, one of my absolute great favorites there, and I just kind of pulled out that one, as well as Life Is Too Short. That was also this is probably his biggest commercial type of album, but again, just one of the legends in the hip hop world, without question.
Yeah, I mean, I love that song "Don't Fight the Feeling" on the second album, and yeah, Freaky Tales is awesome. I remember hearing that as a kid, just like you, and being like, "Oh my god!" Like I used to hide all those tapes, you know, at the time, thinking they're filthy, you know what I mean, or dirty, because my father was so religious, he would not let any of that stuff. But now I'm like, oh, it's so tame compared to what's on the radio.
And the "Don't Fight the Feeling" was such a freaking popular song, even though a lot of people that liked it didn't even know it was Too Short. Yeah. I mean, throughout my dating years as an adult, like no exaggeration, there are 3 different girls that I dated that did not listen to rap music, had no idea who Too Short was. But as soon as they ever heard the intro of that song, oh my gosh, I remember, I loved it. Yeah. Like, what is it about that song? It just caught everybody.
It did. Yeah.
But, yeah, really, really cool stuff. So Too Short's my first one there. Next one is going to be Epmd, Eric Sermon and PMD. This was an album that came out in 1988, and I remember, you know, a little while after it came out, the 2 records that meant more to me than anything in life was Epmd Strictly Business and Van Halen 5150. Like there was about a 6-month time period where you could not get me to listen to anything else. And what I love so much about this particular album, you know, in late to mid 80s, hip hop was again starting to kind of really make its footprint. You know, there were starting to be bands all over or groups all over the place. You know, Yo MTV Raps was kind of coming about, so things were starting to get a little more mainstream, and a lot of the different branches of hip hop started to really kind of develop. Well, the thing that I like so much about EPMD was that they almost did something similar to what we were saying Pantera did for metal, where there was a lot of fun stuff, bubbly stuff, and you know, your Fat Boys and all that type of stuff, which was fantastic. But EPMD was kind of the group that said, wait a minute, we're going to kind of come in and go with this more heavy, if you will, electronic funk type of thing, this Roger and Zapp type of thing. So not the funk that was played by, you know, a slapping the bass guitar, but the funk that was coming around based off of all the voice box stuff and just all the digital and electronic stuff that they could do. And I remember even back then, it just made them seem more serious to me. It made them seem just kind of more like, oh yeah, those guys are having fun, but like these guys aren't BSing over here. And
right.
that's really what this album kind of brought to the table, because it was just so much funk in the samples. And I still to this day, song for song, probably my favorite EPMD album. So great lyricist, the whole nine. And the one other thing I'll say that really kind of separated EPMD from a lot of other bands is the names of their album titles, because it was just all one big play, where their first album was Strictly Business, and then after that they came back and said, we have Unfinished Business, and then after that, you know, they had a little Business as Usual, and then Business Never Personal, and Back in Business. So like, you know, pretty much every single album title or whatever that they just kind of, you know, played off the thing that they originally stepped on the scene with. And I thought there was something that just kind of kept a cohesiveness between their albums, and even though they never really changed their style, they stayed pretty true through everything that they did. So one of my absolute favorite hip hop bands of all time is EPMD.
So Brandon, can I ask you two questions about 80s rap from your perspective? The first one is, do you feel like for a long time 80s rap didn't get the respect I feel like it deserved? And you mentioned this a few weeks ago about Happy, they were smiling and then nobody was smiling, right? Do you feel like right now hair metal or that type of genre is getting a resurgence? Do you feel like it's ever going to happen with 80s rap?
That's actually a pretty good question. I would say probably, I would guess not.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's like, I think just the whole persona of hip hop, that there hasn't been enough splinters with it, if you will.
Right.
You know, so like you could say with the bubbly fun stuff of the 80s, could that have a bit of a resurgence? Like in the pop rock world, there's enough room for a silly, funny set of groups to come across and get radio play and be popular with everything else that's out there. I think hip hop has just seemed like it's been so put into one compartment, and it's almost like there's only one or two things that it can be at any given time, and there's not a lot of room for anything else. Right. So I would love to see it come back in that way, but I would have very little faith in it being that ever happening.
And so, yeah, I think that's a great point. My second question is, man, how do you feel about Will Smith now? Like, I loved Will Smith. Like, I loved him so much. I loved his music. I loved his movies. I loved his TV show. And, you know, I have to admit, like, because I love Chris Rock also. Like, and I felt so bad for Chris Rock that I haven't gone and listened to any of my Will Smith cassettes. Has it changed your thoughts on Will Smith, or do you not care?
I wouldn't say it's changed my thoughts on him as much. And I think mainly because I think Will Smith is kind of in a very, very bad place. And and the one thing that I saw out of that was, I've always had issues with Jada Pinkett. Like long before she ever did anything to say, there was just something that came off of her to me that always seemed angry, on edge, edge and just kind of always ready to do something that maybe you shouldn't do. And I couldn't explain what it was. I just always got that vibe from her. So even with watching that and seeing, you know, Will Smith laughing when Chris makes the joke, seeing Jada's reaction, and almost like the lack of sincerity that he did that action with it didn't feel like his heart was really there, or he was in some zone and felt like he had to do that. It just seemed really clear to me it was all about trying to appease her.
Right.
Yeah, and then later stuff that he posted when she was filming him, when he was like asking her not to film him, not to put him on social media, and she's kind of downing him, and I mean doing interviews where you're talking with him about how you cheated on him, like all of this stuff. You're like, if that was reversed, everyone would be saying abusive relationship, absolute abusive relationship, and like crying to save her. But man, woman reversed, and it's kind of like I think people just don't look at him as being somewhat of a victim.
Yeah, and you're probably right. He probably is. I mean, he shouldn't have slapped Chris Rock, but I get it.
Yeah. And you still have to take responsibility for your own actions. So he did it, so he should take the ramifications of it. But there's a lot of deep, nasty stuff, I think, going on within that household. Yeah. Good question.
Well, great picks. Yeah. We were talking about 80s rap.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was one of the greats, Will Smith.
Yeah, the way he was able to do what he did and keep stuff clean at a time when clean wasn't the popular thing, that was pretty impressive.
It was. And, you know, and he had skills. And, you know, even with his last, well, before he went solo and did Big Willie style and stuff, like that song Summertime, that was the biggest song of that summer, you know.
Yeah.
And he, at that point, he was already a TV star. So
Right.
Yep.
I mean, but be a very talented guy. You can't deny it.
Yep. Right, Chris.
All right.
Will Smith?
What'd you say?
You gonna pick Will Smith?
I'm gonna go with the very serious genre of punk.
Nice.
And the two bands that I'm gonna show are they're more than punk. And some people might not even consider them punk music, but I don't know what other genre to put them into. This first one is probably the punkiest out of both of these, but it's the Dead Milkman.
Nice.
And this is one of my favorite albums growing up. This is their album Beelzebubba. And this was probably their biggest hit. It had the hit Punk Rock Girl. The Dead Milkmen are great. They mix country music, rockabilly, punk music, folk music. They even have some world music on here too, with the first song Brat and the Frat. They also have humor in their songs too. We were just talking about humor in music. Well, these guys are have a lot of humor in their music. What I like about the Dead Milkmen too is that they're actually more talented than they come across. They try to come across as this joke band, and they are a joke band, but they're also a very talented joke band. Just a really cool band that I've always been into. And I would say anybody who's trying to get into Dead Milkmen, I would start with Beelzebubba. This is a great album. I also have their album Bucky Fellini too, which is a great album. These all came out on the Enigma label, which is a great label. I know Stryper was on the Enigma label, but this had a song called Going to Graceland, which was great. This also had a song called Instant Club Hit, which was more of like, they were trying to do sort of like a play on club music a little bit. And just some funny stuff, like a song called The Badger Song and Taco Land, City of Mud, Jellyfish Heaven, just humorous punk music.
You'll Dance to Anything by the Smiths.
Yeah. Sort of playing on synth pop a little bit too. Mm-hmm. And the other band, and I say this to last because hopefully the kids will be sleeping by this point. The band is the Butthole Surfers. And I don't know, the Butthole Surfers are definitely an acquired taste. I'm going to put them in the punk genre, but they're so much more than punk. This album's called Rembrandt Pussy Horse, and Aaron Muth at Alamere sent this album to me. This is just a great album. The Butthole Surfers are everywhere with their music. Like on this album, they cover the Guess Who American Woman on here, but they also have a song called Seafaring, where it's like this folky type psychedelic song. So they're all over the place. They were a crazy band. I read stories about when they used to play live, they'd have like pornos in the background playing as they were playing live. So they were just, I think they were just trying to get to people and sort of push everybody's buttons. Another album by them that I love is an album called, I don't have it on vinyl, but it's called Pmd. And they do some great covers. They cover Donovan's Hurdy Gurdy Man on here. But they also do a song called Lonesome Bulldog, and there's like 4 versions of it on here too, which is pretty cool. But this is a great album too. The Butthole Surfers mix psychedelic music, punk music, country, folk, rock, and a little bit of everything. And for their own hybrid. I just have always really liked the Butthole Surfers. They're not a band that you're going to listen to and go, oh my gosh, like I get it. You have to really listen to them. I mean, they did sort of streamline their sound in the 90s with a song called, I think it was called Pepper.
Yeah.
Which was a big hit for them, but they kind of streamlined it to that sort of grunge sound. But their early stuff is like all over the place. They have an album called Hairway to Steven, which is Stairway to Heaven backwards. And I just that's their humor. Like they were just a great band. Like I don't know. I really dig them. And yeah, so I wanted to show those 2 bands.
No, were they originally called the Asshole Surfers?
I have no idea.
Yeah, Pepper sounds like Beck. It almost sounds like it's a loser.
Yeah.
You know, kind of a influenced by that song. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean their album titles. They have an album called Locust Abortion Technician. So
that's my favorite right there.
Yeah, they're just like all over the place. And I remember as a kid listening to stuff, I was like, what the hell is this? But like it's like a car accident though. Like you want to keep looking at it and listening to it. And I don't know, it's just they're like one of the, like if we ever did a thing on crazy bands, they're one of the craziest ass bands out there.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you have some comments? You want to hear some comments? Plastic Soundwave says Will Smith had a raunchy version of Parents Just Don't Understand and changed it for more radio play, which I had never heard that before. So that's very interesting. Roy says Will Smith allowed his wife to date a friend of his son. Also loved all his movies. Chris Burt says Young MC was clean like DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, but less cheesy. I love Young MC. That is a fantastic album. And Brian Reynolds wrote Love Independent Worm Saloon. John Paul Jones produced that.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. What? I have to read up on that. What the hell was John Paul Jones doing with the Butthole Surfers?
He did a lot of record producing in the 80s, didn't he? And then he went and played with them Crooked Vultures in the 90s. Right, so my next genre is going to be alternative. And I picked a band that I know Chris loves. I don't know if everybody else loves. And that's Counting Crows.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish they would reissue more than the first 2 albums, but I'm afraid that their master tapes were burned in that crazy fire in California. That's what I've heard. But so the first album came out and it was an enormous success. And I loved it, man. That line, I stepped out to the front door like a ghost into the fog where no one notices the contrast of white on white. I feel like it's not only one of the greatest opening lines to any song, it's also the opening line to the album. Yeah. You know, me and my brother used to play this game, who could name the better opening line to any song. And generally Tom Petty would win with "So You Think You're Gonna Take Her Away with Your Money and Your Cocaine," but this was close. But this album, "Recovering the Satellites," it's such a fantastic album. The singer was going through a breakup. He dated this girl before they were famous, and she lived outside of San Francisco. And he said that when they used to date, it would take him like an hour to bring her home and to go back to San Francisco where he lived. And he wrote a lot of songs. Well, they broke up during the height of their success. And this album deals a lot with dealing with that, dealing with fame, dealing with the breakup. And he's so open with his lyrics. And it's a dark album, but it's really great. And I love it. So that's my first band. The second one is one of my favorite alternative bands of all time, Faith No More. A lot of people know The Real Thing with Epic, but I think that every single one of their albums is amazing. They only have a handful of albums, so it's not like if you want to dive into their catalog, it's not like you're talking 20 albums. And their sound evolves, just like Mr. Bungle or any other of Mike Patton's music. No two albums are exactly the same. They generally blend multiple genres of music into what makes Faith No More Faith No More. Super talented. My favorite album by them is probably Angel Dust, but this album of King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime is great. There's a song, The Gentle Art of Making Enemies. I love that song. And then the next album of the year, has a song called Last Cup of Sorrow. That's one of my all-time favorite songs, and especially of that genre. So two of my favorite alternative bands that I don't generally show on my channel, Counting Crows and Faith No More. Not that I should show them. It's just, there's no reason sometimes.
Dude, you're right though. You could not go anywhere. Because August and Everything After came out when I was in college, and you couldn't, like, every dorm room was playing that.
Yeah. It was enormous. And so many great songs. Every song is like a masterpiece. Anna Begins, what a great song. And it's like, that song wasn't even a hit. There's a line in that song where he's he's like, I'm gonna pin her down in a photograph album because I am not worried. He's like convincing himself that, like, this relationship that is somewhat toxic, right? It's beautiful, but it's toxic at the same time. He's like, I am not worried. And I love that, because it's like, he's not only convincing himself, he's convincing his audience. Like, he's like, someone doesn't say they're not worried unless they're truly worried, right? And I love the fragility about his lyrics. They're ultra, it's someone that's showing that they're human. They're not masquerading this ultra masculinity. I love it.
Yeah, that's great picks, man.
Thanks, man.
Album. Really great album.
We need some more Counting Crows reissues. Hard Candy is like never been on vinyl, and This Desert Life is like a $700 record now or something, or $1,200 record. So yeah, it'd be great to get some reissues of those.
All right. Well, the last genre that I'm going to show is, and I didn't realize there was actually a name for this genre. It was actually Logan from Murmur Than Hell who kind of clued me in that this actually had a name. And I'm going with Sophistopop, which was big in the early 80s. And it was kind of like the bands that most people would know would be like Spandau Ballet, would be a Sophistopop band, Brian Ferry, ABC. So kind of these bands, they wore suits, they looked very suave, and their music was kind of, part jazz, part pop. But the first artist that I'm going to show is the Style Council. And this was kind of a vanity project for Paul Weller after he broke up the Jam, which had been a very influential band in the UK in the late 70s and early 80s. But it's got almost like kind of a lounge feel to it, smooth jazz a little bit, but it's very laid back. It's very chill, just such a different direction than the music that he'd been known for with the Jam. But they've got about 6 albums that they released. There's that one. Another one of my favorites is Internationalist. You got songs like The Walls Came Tumbling Down, is one of the big ones, My Ever-Changing Moods. Nothing that I don't know many people in North America would really recognize. I think some of their videos were played on MTV, but I enjoy it a lot just because I think I like, that early 80s, just that sound. And I thought it was, more synth pop than anything else, but didn't really have a definition. And it's called Sophistopop, and it's got quite a few fans who were nostalgic for that era. The other band I want to show is Scritti Politti, which I may or may not have talked about before. They could be classified as synth pop as well. And this is just a phenomenal, you call it synth pop, call it Sophistopop, whatever. Miles Davis, of all people, was a fan of Scritti Politti. In fact, he covered their song Perfect Way on one of his albums. He does a instrumental cover of Perfect Way. And he was a big Scritti Politti fan, but this had the song Perfect Way was the biggest hit that they had off of this one. But The Word Girl is a great track off here. Would Bees is a great track. But this is really an enjoyable, just early 80s poppy album. Kind of like Duran Duran, kind of in that whole realm of musical, influence stylistically. That was 85. This album came out, their follow-up in 1988. This is Provision. It's got a little bit more of a R&B kind of techno sound to it. I don't think anything off here got played either on MTV or on the radio. I only bought it because I love that Cupid and Psyche 85 so much. I got this one. It's enjoyable too. It's just very much kind of UK synth pop from the early 80s. But I think, Roxy Music was one of the bands that sort of were the godfathers of Sophistopop. But yeah, I mean, you could almost, like Simply Red, I think is another great Sophistopop. So it's kind of in that whole, that whole early 80s jazzy kind of pop sound.
So my ears perked up when you said Miles Davis covered a Scritti Politti song, because I'm like, Miles is cool. So if he's covering Scritti Politti, there's got to be something there. So I just added that to my Amazon cart.
Yeah, it's great. I think you'll like it, Chris, because I mean, we're both Thompson Twins fans, and it's kind of in that whole, sound as well.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So
you want to see some comments before?
Let's bring them on.
All right. So just Art Room Records joined, and he just wanted to say hey. But Chris said that John Paul Jones produced REM's Automatic for the People, which I was not aware of that. Did you know that, Jeff?
Yeah, well, and I knew he did the string arrangement on Night Swimming.
Oh, yeah, that's...
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite REM songs.
Oh, such a great song. Plastic Soundwave says the first two Counting Crows albums are great. Chris says that This Desert Life was a great album also. Art Room Records says the only Counting Crows fun fact I know is Between the Buried and Me got their name from one of their lines. Yeah, I do know that line. I just have to remember what song it is. Plastic Soundwave likes the song Perfect Blue Buildings, which is a great song. Brian wrote Love, Faith No More. Hard to believe Angel Dust is 30 years old this year. I know I saw Faith No More on that tour, the Angel Dust tour. It was awesome. I don't know Faith No More much, but I love their cover of Easy. Man, that version of Easy is awesome. And then Plastic Soundwave says he has a 12-inch for Hypnotize. And then Chris said, I probably assumed he produced REM. I could be wrong. But no, he definitely did Night Swimming. I do remember hearing that. which, you know, REM Automatic for the People is just such a fantastic album. I mean, I love all the REM albums up until the New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Those albums to me are all, I would not want to live without any of them in my collection. But after that, they get spotty for me.
Yeah, after Bill Berry left, that was sort of the end of the classic REM period. It kind of lost the plot a little bit after that. But
yeah.
And not that they put out any bad albums after New Adventures in Hi-Fi, but they just stopped sounding like REM after a certain point. And, you know, their albums were not consistently great like they were up to, you know, the point where Bill Berry left. You know, I think they were trying to sound a little bit like Radiohead, kind of mix in some of those sound textures. And then they went in a completely kind of a opposite direction, you know, after that with Reveal, which, you know, sort of got like that California, like that late 70s California sound to it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about REM because probably nobody else would care. But anyway, yeah. So, very cool. Yeah. Well, you know, I love seeing what you guys pull, what genres you guys pick. But Brandon, were there any other genres that you had also kind of pulled aside in case we picked something of yours?
Yeah, I mean, you guys were pulling some awesome jazz stuff, so I skipped over my jazz. But like one that I had was kind of on the free jazz side of things. So one that I was going to show there was Coltrane's Ascension from 1966. And nice. It's a really, really great album, you know, with a lot of the big names. I mean, Elvin Jones, Freddie Hubbard, Tyner, I mean, you know, Pharaoh, just, I mean, some of the gigantic names of jazz. And it's just something about just like those guys getting in a room and just vibing and playing off each other. For the longest time, I didn't understand what free jazz was like at all, you know, and kind of like Chris was saying, it's this kind of stuff that you don't want to put on at a dinner party because everyone will just take off, you know. But a number of years ago, that stuff just started making sense to me, you know. And it's just like when you listen to it, you have all of these random things going on, and you find your place in it, you know. And it's so funny because I'll be sitting there like, you know, tapping my foot or nodding my head. There's no beat that's correlating with how I'm nodding my head, but it's just something I'm feeling, and you know, the vibe, and that album is just one of my absolute favorites on that line.
Well, and all roads lead to Charlie Parker. You know, Charlie Parker blew everybody's mind when he started, you know, when he invented the whole bebop, when that whole revolution took over, and you had artists like Miles Davis and John Coltrane, you know, who totally revamped their style of playing. And then, you know, Ornette Coleman's like, hold my beer, I'll take it even a step further. And, you know, blew people's minds even more. They didn't think jazz could get more far out than bebop. And then Ornette Coleman with his free jazz, you know, even the bebop fans were like, that's a little too far. I can't go there. I'm drawing the line in the sand, you know. And it's funny because, you know, the people that were giving Ornette Coleman crap for his free jazz, you know, were the same people who got crap because they weren't playing, you know, the traditional, you know, kind of jazz, the big band, and you know, it's kind of more danceable kind of jazz.
And it never fails. And the other one I was going to show there was Sunrise, Strange Strings.
Nice.
You know, another really great one there. And easiest way to describe that album, really kind of, there's a couple different albums right in that stretch, is most of them sounds like there's an orchestra that was backstage warming up and somebody snuck into the room and just set a microphone in the middle of the floor and snuck out. And you're just catching all of these people just warming up their instruments and, you know, getting ready to go perform. And I for whatever reason, I love it. It hits a spot. Yes, I was totally digging the stuff you were showing. That he has so many albums out there too. It's like endless.
Yeah, and I think like some of his first albums were only available at live shows. Like I think he was just making them in his house or something like that, and he was just selling them at his shows. Yeah.
He's like the Rod McEwen of jazz.
Well, and thank you for bringing up Rod McEwen, because I just want to say something to Brandon, because Brandon was showing some classical music, and and this is no joke. Rod McEwen made some kick-ass classical albums, and because I don't really listen to a lot of classical music, but for whatever reason, I really like Rod McEwen's classical album. So if you're interested, Brandon, you can say no, I don't care. I can point you to some Rod McEwen classical records, because if you like classical music, take the Rod McEwen name out of it, you would think it was, composer X or anything, you know what I mean? So if you're interested, I can point you to some classical albums by Rod McEwen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's still an area where I'm still really trying to grow. I mean, I have like the certain composers that I absolutely love, but I don't have a vast knowledge on the classical side. So yeah, I'm open to anything you think I might dig.
Yeah. I mean, he's just got some great classical music. I was going to show singer-songwriter tonight, and I guess the other genre I'm just going to call it vocal. And I think Frank Sinatra would fit into that category. I love Frank Sinatra, but yeah.
Yeah, he's great. I was just, as far as classical goes, I was going to say, even like Paul McCartney has been composing. This is called work classical, and this one, he scored some of his, popular solo, I don't want to call them hits necessarily, but there's orchestral versions of like songs like Junk, Maybe I'm Amazed, Warm and Beautiful, She's My Baby, off the Wings at the Speed of Sound album, The Lovely Linda, Calico Skies, Golden Earth Girl, Some Days. So if you like Paul McCartney and you want to get into classical a bit more, he's got, the Liverpool Oratorio as well. But
well, along those lines too, Billy Joel has a classical record as well. Where it's straight up like piano classical music. Like you listen to it, you're like, this is really Billy Joel. But yeah, like he wrote some kick-ass classical piano stuff, and he has a famous pianist play it. I forget his name, because again, I'm not up on my classical music, but if you like Billy Joel and you like classical music, I definitely check that out as well.
Cool. Yeah, I knew Billy Joel. He stopped putting out pop albums, or whatever you want to call, rock pop albums. But he still, would dabble in classical music. I think even Roger Waters of Pink Floyd did an opera album or something like that. So yeah, I feel like certain artists, after they feel like, well, I've already done the rock thing, I've done, countless albums in my style, and they want to branch out and do something different. Elvis Costello, has dabbled in different genres like opera and classical and jazz and things like that.
I don't think the Butthole Surfers ever did a classical record, though.
I think Gibby Haynes did. Gibby Haynes did a classical album. Yeah, with Andrea Bocelli.
Okay. Wasn't there was an album called Never Mind the Bollocks? Was that a classical record?
It was. I mean, it was on a classical label. I know that.
Oh, was it on Deutsche Grammophon?
I think so.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So do you guys want
to stare down the last first?
Yeah. Do you guys want to? So tonight was the first night of the stadium tour, and I don't want to ruin any spoilers for anybody, but do you guys want to know anything about the stadium tour of Motley Crue, Def Leppard, Joan Jett, and Poison?
How much does Vince Neil weigh now?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the deal. I've seen pictures. He's definitely lost weight. There's no doubt about it. Is it significant? No. But, if he was 300 pounds, maybe he's 250. Like, you can tell that he's lost weight. So I give the guy credit. I can tell you that Tommy Lee was replaced halfway through the set. I don't know for the whole set or not, but they said that he had 14 broken ribs. that he sustained 14 days ago. And that is the reason why. So Joan Jett played an hour, Poison played an hour, Motley Crue's playing about an hour and a half, Def Leppard's playing an hour and a half. I have the set list, but I don't want to ruin it for anybody if they're going to the show. But you guys can Google the set list. But there's some songs that they haven't played in a long time that they're playing, including they do a melody of covers, like 5 covers in the middle. So yeah, but if you Google it, Vince Neil has lost some weight.
Well, I'd like to see Motley Crue because I saw Poison live with Tesla, and I saw Def Leppard with Bryan Adams of all people. I've never seen Joan Jett, but I'm not a huge Joan Jett fan. But I'd like to see Motley Crue.
Oh, I saw Motley Crue in their heyday, and have I told you guys about that? When my dad took me, I was 14 years old. All the girls started taking off their clothes. My dad was like blown away. Yeah, instant.
Instead taking off the clothes, I'm like ding 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly. Instant Motley Crue. But yeah, it was fantastic. I did Motley Crue.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, go ahead. No, I thought you were not. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I also saw Motley Crue at a tiny club in Boston at the Orpheum, which was really cool too. But that was later on in their career, like when they were getting back together with Vince. So.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Did you get the chance to meet him or anything? Or
nope, I never met any of the members of Motley Crue. I've seen them 5 times, but the last time I saw them was when the New Tattoo, Tommy was out of the band, and after that, I was like, oh, you could just tell they had kind of lost either the drive or the heart or whatever. But they could be better now, you know.
Yeah. That's cool.
Favorite Motley Crue album?
Shout Out the Devil is so good. Yeah, I'd probably Shout Out the Devil.
I'm gonna say I'm going Too Fast for Love. I love that album.
That's a great one.
I have to give Feel Good just a nod over Shout at the Devil.
Yeah.
Feel
Good is the one that people have this like revisionist history where they hate on it. But I admit, like She Goes Down, or there's some songs where you're like a little like cringe-worthy, but they're still catchy ass songs.
Right.
Yeah, super catchy songs. And I love what you said the other day about your mix, dude, because you made that mix, and you don't know how often that happens to me. For those that maybe haven't seen it, go watch Brandon's video. But Brandon made a mix of 2 albums, and it was Motley Crue and UB40, right?
Right.
Both fantastic albums. But the sequencing of it, and the biggest example I can give you is, so we would always make mixes, me and my friends, because we cruised the Ave, which I don't know if you guys did that in your towns, where you drove up this long road real slow and you played the music real fast. And we would mix hip hop and metal and rock because we all had different favorites. And I can tell you that, like, there was a Kiss song, I think it was I Just Wanna, that song of Revenge, I Just Wanna, and it went into Paperboy Diddy, do the Diddy if you want to, because then so every time that song ends, I'm like, I want to hear do the Diddy. It's awesome. Which is so random. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I just want to hear it.
Oh man.
That's what it makes me think of. Yeah.
And someone left an awesome comment on that same video because they said something to the effect of they had recorded something, had their mix, and the tape had a little issue where it ticked at a certain point. So now every time they hear that song, they expect the tick to be in there, and it's not there.
Yeah, have you ever had that where you recorded an album or a song onto a tape and maybe the record skipped or there was some imperfection, and now every time you hear it, you're like expecting that particular imperfection, and it's like, no.
You know what's a good example of that is on some versions of Billy Joel's greatest hits, the song Pressure, they exclude part of it to be able to fit on either the vinyl pressing but that was the version I heard. So when I got the album and heard not the greatest hits version of Pressure by Billy Joel. I'm like, where the fuck is this extra verse coming from? Like, this is like, to me, it was so off-putting. And it's that line where he talks like, the bases are loaded. There's two men out, you're at the plate. And it's not on some of the versions of the greatest hits. Like, I swear to you. So when I hear it, it's so weird.
Yeah, the thing that I always, the closest I have to something like that is on the cassette version of Pink Floyd's Animals, the song Pigs, three different ones, fades out in the middle. Like the second where you have that cowbell interlude, it like fades out, and then you flip the tape over and it fades back into the rest of the song. So whenever I hear Pigs, three different ones, I always like, when it gets to that point in the song, I'm like expecting it to fade out, and it doesn't. And and I know it's not going to, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, if I were listening to the cassette right now, I would totally be having to fade out and flip it over.
Yeah.
It gets wired in, man. It's just,
yeah, totally.
That's funny.
Chris, one day
I love hearing that kind of stuff.
Chris, one day we were cruising the Ave, we met these girls, me and my friend Rob, and my friend Rob was real preppy, like very preppy. Like he didn't wear, like he liked heavy metal, but mostly like the Kiss and the things like that. Yeah. But he was more of a Smiths fan, REM and stuff like that. And he's talking to this girl, and he dated her for a while. Her name was Lisa. And he comes back to me. He's like, Josh, you got to help me out. I said, what? He's like, I just talked to this girl, and I know she loves Danzig. I'm like, hell yeah. Because he knew who Danzig was because I was so obsessed. But she also likes this guy, King Diamond. Because he was like, hey, what music do you like? She's like, oh, Danzig, King Diamond. He's like, who's King Diamond? I'm like, oh, shit, Rob, you ain't going to like King Diamond. I was like, there's no chance you're going to like King Diamond, dude.
No.
And I was right. He did not like him.
I tell you what, now I got to find a girl who likes King Diamond.
I was going to say, were you like, wait, that should be my girlfriend?
Exactly. Yeah. I was thinking, like, what's going on? He got to her first, though.
Like if I ever met a girl and she'd be like, dude, do you like Merciful Fate? I love that album, Melissa. I'd be like, you and I, like, this is like from the stars.
Yeah.
Your soulmate over King Diamond.
Yeah.
And she was like blonde hair, blue eyes, like, she wasn't like a goth chick that would be like, you'd think like, oh, that girl definitely listens to King Diamond. Yeah. I was like, oh man, I didn't see it coming.
All right, I'm going to take this conversation in a completely different direction because I was going to do a video about this particular album, this particular topic, and talking about Pink Floyd Animals made me think of it. But I love Pink Floyd Animals, except I'm not crazy about the way Nick Mason's drumming sounds on that album. It sounds muffled. Something weird about the snare drum and the kick drum on that album that just kind of, I don't want to say it ruins it for me, but I would like it a whole lot better if the drum sound wasn't so muffled. I even looked it up online. Why does it sound that way? It doesn't sound that way on any other Pink Floyd album. Why is this drum? And they said, well, they were in a new studio that they hadn't recorded in before, or Nick Mason is just a shitty drummer, which he's not. He's not a crappy drummer. But I mean, anybody know what I'm talking about, or is this entirely like in my head? And
I think it's in your head because I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Listen to it again.
Now I'm afraid you're gonna curse me, man.
And don't.
You're gonna ruin the album forever.
You're gonna ruin this perfect album for me. No, they are coming out with the new remix that's 4 years in the making, right? Maybe that will have improved the drum sound on that one for you.
Yeah, it's just my only issue with it. And I'm just, I don't know. I'm not out of my head, but I'm not going to do a video about it because I don't need a bunch of people giving me crap. It's fine. It's fine. The problem is you. The problem's not. I've been listening to that album for 20 years, 30 years, and there's just something about the way Nick Mason's snare drum on that side. It's muffled. It's muffled.
I don't know. I think
it's not.
I don't know. Now I'm going to listen to it again. But let's talk about Animals for a second. Why has that suddenly become everybody's favorite Pink Floyd record?
Because I think classic rock radio just overplays everything else. I mean, honestly, classic rock radio hammers. Like, let's face facts that the early Pink Floyd albums are a little bit more, not as easily digestible. Is that a good way of saying it? Right. Yeah. So let's just face facts on that one.
Yeah, like you're not gonna put Gumma on your first date.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So the other Pink Floyd albums, you know, with the complete band, besides the final cut, is hammered on classic rock radio. I mean, at least it is in my area. You cannot go a day without hearing a song off the wall, of Dark Side of the Moon. You know, those albums are hammered. I do feel that Animals they're long songs, so they might be harder to be played on the radio, but you don't hear them. So it's just like Technical Ecstasy, right? Technical Ecstasy is becoming more and more popular. And probably the reason why is because for many people, they skipped over that album because all the other ones had the hits, but there's only so many times that you're going to pull out the same album. Maybe not, you know, but I think that's probably the reason why. It may be a little cool to say Animals is your favorite album. But all I know is that I'd rather, you know, if people say Animals is my favorite album and Dark Side sucks, then I think they're an idiot. If people say like, oh, I love Animals because I'm burnt out on Dark Side, well, I get it. I mean, like, I'm burnt out on Mama, I'm Coming Home. Doesn't mean it's a bad song,
right,
but I'm totally burnt out on it, you know?
Yeah.
Because when the radio plays Ozzy, that's what they're going to play.
Yep.
And I'm looking at Pink Floyd's discography right now. How the hell, and I like Obscured by Clouds. I think it's an underrated album. How the hell did they go from Obscured by Clouds to Dark Side of the Moon? That was like within a year. I mean, that is like a huge ass jump. And again, Obscured by Clouds is a phenomenal record, but sonically it's not Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, right. But like Childhood's End, for example, the beginning of Childhood's End, I mean, that's time. That's like the beginning of time right there, that like tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, you know, I mean, that's sort of but yeah, that entire album, there's no way you would have thought, oh, well, you know, that is a huge leap from Obscured by Clouds, the stuff that's on that, to even Metal. Even Metal, it's a huge jump even from Metal, you know, which was the album before Obscured by Clouds. But, you know, in answer to your question, Josh, about why is, you know, it's so many people's favorite, I mean, there could be a number of reasons. It could be, you know, Dark Side used to be everybody's favorite. And then, well, you can't say Dark Side. That's so overplayed. It's so overdone. You can't say The Wall because that's been so overplayed on FM radio for a time. Wish You Were Here was everybody's favorite album. And then I think some of it's, rediscovery. People kind of just glossed over Animals, or they didn't really give it a good listen. You know, I don't know. I mean, that would be what I would suspect is just it's an album people have come around to, maybe. That they didn't give it a fair chance. They listened to it once and were kind of like, whatever, those songs are too long. But yeah, I don't know where I would rank it. I'd have to sit down and think about, you know, how I would rank my favorite Pink Floyd albums. But
well, what do you think about Roger Waters I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Roger Waters, when he toured, he did a lot of songs off Animals, right? Mm-hmm. Like he did Pigs. Like, do you feel like that brought like people that were seeing that never saw Pink Floyd, because a lot of young kids went to that concert, that could have introduced them to that album too?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the more exposure it gets, the more people realize what a great album. I mean, I don't know that David Gilmour has played guitar better than the song Dogs. I mean, that is a David Gilmour showpiece. He is all over the place on that. I mean, if you need to know why people love David Gilmour and his guitar playing so much, just play him that track. But
and sometimes, Chris, will, like what you were talking about with like how did they go and, you know, get to Dark Side of the Moon. I think sometimes it can come through our filter a little bit different, because it seems really easy for us at any point in time to say, well, like we did with REM earlier, we're like, well, after this album, they just kind of lost me, you know. But it's like sometimes after this album, they don't lose me. They actually produce the biggest and greatest thing like in history of rock and roll kind of thing.
Right.
I just think that's really what it was with Pink Floyd, is they kind of took a gamble to say, we want to try something new. And it ended up being, just this landmark thing, and not the thing that just made everyone go, oh, Pink Floyd's, they've lost their way, I'm done with them. And
yeah, it's just crazy because a couple albums before that was Adam Hart Mother.
Right.
That's like
right.
Yeah.
But the Beatles, very similar, not as dramatic. The Beatles always had a pop sensibility to them, but think about the dramatic change that they made, where they went from this essentially ultra pop music in just a matter of years. Music were making a sonical jump. And it's funny because, someone posted that meme. Think about it, that we happen to live in the 100-year period where Van Halen was around, right? And it is true to a certain extent. Bill Maher said, we live in an industry, we live in an area, right, a time frame right now where a comedian can make millions, where 100 years ago he would be a clown and would live poor. We live in a time frame right now where if you can throw a ball 100 miles an hour, you're a millionaire, where before it wouldn't have granted you any additional money, right? Like, it's just, you just had a skill. So we live in a unique time period. But if you think about the time period we live in, if I live to 2060, right? Let's see, that would be another like 40 years, right? So at that point, I would be 90. If that happens, right? JFK died in 63. But in the 60s is where really music started to make huge shifts, as we know, right? But to think about that 100-year period in recorded media, right now people are still listening to music from the 60s. The Beatles are still one of the highest selling bands in 2020, and they were in the 60s, right? So think about that. Nobody's listening. Well, people listen to Frank Sinatra, but a gentleman that owns me a record store says every year they sell less Frank Sinatra albums, every year they sell less Elvis albums, but every year they don't sell less Beatles albums, they don't sell less Rolling Stones albums, they don't sell less Led Zeppelin. They actually sell more. They sell more Pink Floyd. My son, who's 15 years old, has a Van Halen, has a Led Zeppelin, has a Pink Floyd album, has a Beatles album. So think about that. He has a Whitney Houston album. It's the recorded media from the 60s on, for the most part, is super relevant and resonating with people. And who knows why?
Well, I've always maintained the 60s had the biggest musical growth of any decade, I think, that's ever been, honest. I mean, quite frankly, because think about what people were listening to in 1961, Frankie Avalon, Elvis, like Dick Dale, just some of like the early, surf music kind of stuff. And then what people were listening to in 1969, I mean, with Hendrix and Creedence Clearwater Revival and Grateful Dead and Cream and Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath. I mean, that is a huge leap. Never mind what the Beatles or Beach Boys were doing, just in general. And take any other decade, and I think it's no comparison.
And the same sonic shift with jazz. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Duke. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the same shift with jazz and funk, and that music was evolving from all areas in the 60s. But Brandon, you go.
Yeah. Well,
and some of it, I mean, it has to be said, some of it had to do with drugs and LSD and people expanding their minds.
Right. That's for sure. Well, I was just going to say, like a long time ago, years and years ago, we did a thread, and the question was, like, what are the possibilities of us having the legendary type of albums that we had from the past? Like, can those same albums be made today? Like, can you have a Blonde on Blonde? Can you have, a Beatles White Album, and on and on and on? And so, like, when I remember answering that question, I was saying, yeah, it's possible that a Nirvana Nevermind can kind of come out and completely change the landscape of music and all that type of stuff. But I also think it's like highly unlikely. And it's such a difficult thing, because just like when we landed on the moon for the first time, if I say one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, most people kind of know exactly what that is. Like, that's just a gigantic moment that's seared into our history, and we actually talk about that. Tell me one sentence that was said on the 15th Apollo mission. Like,
right.
Nobody freaking knows. Like, look how amazing the things are that we can do with technology today. I mean, the average smartphone has more technology than the guidance system had on the first Apollo mission. But yet it's just something about that first time when it first came around, the newness of it, the incredible nature of it, and all of that. I think music carries a lot of that same thing. So it's like that magic that was brought about with Dylan, with the Beatles, with all of that stuff that took place. There's something that carries over with that. And just the next band coming out doing the next thing just doesn't have as much magic, even if they sell 1 million copies.
So let's talk about the Beatles here for a second. Why, and go along with what you're saying. Why do the Beatles still resonate with people? Like, my son is 15 years old and he is obsessed with the Beatles music. Like, why does music that came out in the 60s still resonate with kids and people today? What the hell did the Beatles do? Did they tap into some sort of like musical psyche that will always, just transcend generations? How the hell, what, I guess I'm just asking why. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
But why does their music still, I guess simply, why does their music still resonate with people today?
Well, here's what I think. I was watching this podcast by the singer of Darkness, Justin Hawkins, and he was talking about how the #1 song in the country is Kate Bush with Running Up That Hill. And he's like, of course this song is going to resonate with young people because it's someone pouring their heart out. And a lot of modern music, not all, but a lot of modern music is either A, nonsensical, or B, it's filthy, or it's just a mixture of the people are listening to it more for the beat than what is being said. So when someone pours their heart out, it resonates. People can feel that. I think that the great thing about the Beatles is they mix, the lyrics are fantastic. All of them could write fantastic lyrics, but their songs are so damn catchy too. Like, they stay in your head. Paul McCartney is one of the greatest songwriters of all time. And I feel it's that mixture, that pop sensibility, but also just an amazing lyricist. They push themselves to each outdo each other. And my goodness, it was a perfect storm. I just think they're one of the greatest bands of all time. And people recognize that right away. Even as a kid, I got so burnt out on the Beatles because my dad was obsessed and he played them every single weekend. Yeah. But here I am. I still listen to them, even though I grew up in a household that, he played them all the time.
But you're right. I mean, like, think about a song like Obla Di Obla Da. Even if you don't like that freaking song, once you hear it, it's stuck in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and even though Obla Di Obla Da is kind of nonsensical, right? Then they tie it in with, Life Goes On and the other great lyrics in the song. So you're like, it still resonates to a certain extent, I think, with people.
Yeah.
But Here Comes the Sun, something.
Well, we should this is just the beginning. I really think we should have a discussion on the Beatles. Like, and I know it's been done, but
I'm not really a Beatles fan, but you got no.
I mean, we could sit here and talk for hours about the Beatles.
Yeah, easily. I mean, just their contribution to music, their progression that they made over the space of 8 years. Really, it was sort of like an arms race back in the 60s. You had Bob Dylan, you had the Rolling Stones, you had the Beatles, you had the Beach Boys, you had the Who, the Kinks. I mean, just all these phenomenal bands, and they were in competition with each other to, discover the next sound. The Beatles had a sitar on Norwegian Wood. Next thing you know, everybody's incorporating a sitar, and they had backwards music on I'm Only Sleeping in Rain. Next thing you know, everybody's incorporating, backwards music and recording things backwards, and the heaviness of Revolution, the Baroque pop of Eleanor Rigby. So yeah, and it was, just an exciting time. I had to imagine it was such an exciting time to live in, waiting for the next Rolling Stones single, or the next Who single, or the next Beatles single, and before the days of the internet, what are they going to look like? What's the new sound going to be? Country rock. And
well, you're right about that too. Like bands nowadays, I don't feel take any chances, and I think it has to do with record labels. Record labels used to give bands a chance to progress and find their sound. Nowadays, it's like nobody wants to take any chances. Like today, I just did a video on the new Anvil record, and again, I know Anvil is nothing like the Beatles, but Anvil and Creator, I didn't. It's almost like I didn't even need to buy the CD because I knew what it was going to sound like,
Right.
and that's not always a bad thing, but I just feel like bands aren't taking chances anymore. I think the last band that really took a chance was Radiohead.
Well, I feel like there's just a lack of balance, and what I mean by that is I do think there's bands that take chances, but they're underground bands and they're not very big and they make abstract music. But what I mean by balance is that like I'm a huge Kanye West fan, believe it or not, guys. Like I don't show him on my channel because a lot of people hate Kanye so much, and I just don't want the drama. But Yeezus, Dark Twisted Fantasy, I love those albums, and I can understand his talent. The guy is extremely talented. Is he an asshole? Yes. But here's what I mean by balance. Like Lady Gaga's Poker Face came on. Man, I love that song. That is like a pop masterpiece. That's like a Cyndi Lauper song, right? Like we talked about Cyndi Lauper, how much we love Cyndi Lauper. That song Poker Face comes on. I'm like, I love it. It's so catchy, right? But the music industry right now, what's popular is that pop music is put on a pedestal, and then the hip hop music is here, right? So there's like hip hop, pop.
You gotta put country. You gotta put country in there too.
And then there's country, but country also is saturated with Applebee's and trucks, and so it instantly turns off a certain amount of people. I do believe country music is the Bon Jovi of today. Right, like it is the when we were kids, the girls loved Bon Jovi. They loved that poppy rock music, and country has filled that. And there is a lot of good country music. My girlfriend's obsessed with it. But in the 80s, the 60s, the 70s, there was so much popular music that, like Herbie Hancock, right? Like he was super popular in the 60s and 70s. Obviously 70s is where he really incorporated a lot of funk. Even in the early 80s he did. But at the same time, during that same time period, you had Black Sabbath, you had all these different genres of music. Yeah. Radio does not play any modern heavy metal. They don't play hard rock. They play 80s, 70s, 60s. So those bands don't have a chance again on the radio. And that's what I mean by balance. There is
well, and I feel like, do people listen to the radio as much anymore? Probably fewer people are listening to the radio than have in 100 years, well, however long radio's been around, because you got streaming services, you got Spotify, people can listen to their phone in their car. There's so many different options that people have listening to music that, who needs radio anymore, and putting up with all it's kind of like, for me, like, why do I don't watch network TV anymore. I don't want to I don't want to see commercials. I feel the same way about radio. I don't want the limited choices that are on network TV. I'm going to go watch Netflix or Hulu or HBO Max or one of those. Same with radio. I'll play I'll listen to what I want to listen to. A lot of the new music that I listen to is watching other people on YouTube talk about vinyl finds or their favorite album. And you guys, have recommended some great albums to me, or sent me great albums also.
Why would you want to put the radio? Why would you want to put the radio on and hear "Welcome to the Jungle" for the 100,000th time? And again, nothing against that song, but maybe you want to listen to Spaghetti Incident. It's like,
Yeah, when I was out in California recently, and the car that I was using out there, I didn't have things to hook up with. So I did have the radio on for like about a week or so straight, and it's like I can't go one day without hearing More Than a Feeling by Boston 3 times that same day. And you're like, yeah, fantastic song, but holy cow, 3 times in one day?
Yeah,
it's just it's insane. And
Josh, it's funny. Okay.
I was just going to say, just kind of touching on, I think exactly what you were saying there a moment ago. The word that I always kind of use that to me describes what you were talking about is when music got to the point and the whole entertainment, mechanism surrounding music, it all became a formula. Where it wasn't that way. No one ever said there has to be 15 Bob Dylans. It's like, it's a talent. He's doing what he's doing. The Beatles will do what they do, and Zeppelin and blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, as soon as things start to get a little bit bigger, there's money to be made and all of that. Now everything is this formula. Everything has to be controlled. Everything needs to be, no, you're a band coming out in the 80s, hair band, rock band or whatever. You can't do your own thing. We need a hit, and then we need a ballad. And now we need a hit and we need a ballad. And it's like, you're not allowed to do anything else. And I think even some of those bands that maybe are going to be known as well, or let me put it this way, the bands that even are big that we know, I still think there's so much hidden music that's underneath that they never got the opportunity to lay out there that could be legendary stuff that was be around forever. But like you were saying, that they weren't allowed just to be genuine and leave their hearts out there. Because follow the formula. We need a hit, and then we need a ballad, and we need you on MTV 5 times a day with your big hair, and we need the girls to like you, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, and what I was going to say is, like, a band like Lord Huron, which I know that most of us love, their last album, they did such a sonic shift. I feel like, even though they stayed in their pocket, you could tell they were branching out, where they tried to make it sound like they were playing some old radio show. And, you think about the record company must have been like, what the frig are you guys doing? I mean, like, because it's like you said, they're not following a formula. One of my favorite bands, Dawes, they have a song, When the Tequila Runs Out, which is probably their most poppy song. And they said like, it was freeing to write a song like that, because once we wrote the song and we understood that the record company was like, no, you can't put that on that album, it made us feel like we could write whatever we wanted. And I bet you a lot of bands probably feel that way.
Yeah.
They don't want to lose their audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you go back and follow, like a Zeppelin, and it's like, they did hard rock here, they did blues here, they did reggae here. It's like, that's the genius, because they were just allowed to be the musical geniuses that they were.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at Black Sabbath. I mean, they did the song Changes, which was a piano ballad, and then also Sweet Leaf. And then you're right. I mean, bands took more chances. I don't know. And it was okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You didn't have to worry. Oh, are we going to lose our record contract because we went too far out of our comfort zone?
I mean, there are bands like that. I mean, Radiohead takes chances. I'm not a huge Wilco fan, but I know Wilco plays around with a lot of different styles of music as well. You just have to dig deep. I mean, I've talked about the Mavericks before, and I know Josh loves the Mavericks. You ask most people, do you know the Mavericks? They don't know the Mavericks, but they should know the Mavericks, because they're a kick-ass band that mixes Cuban music and country and rockabilly. And I mean, there's just so much good music out there, and we know that, but most people don't, and they don't really want to dig and look.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny because when Michelle meets somebody that likes music, they'll say to her, like, oh, what does your boyfriend listen to? And she'll say, jokingly but serious, 90% of stuff he listens to, you probably don't know. And I'm like, I'm not that bad, but it's like, I can understand. She lives in a world where country music and pop music is what she knows. So when she's flipping through my collection, unless it's one of these legendary rock bands, it's really going to be in her pop wheelhouse. You know what I mean? Like her first album was, the cassette she got was Jodeci. So like, you know, it's like for her, it's like that was her Motley Crue, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, so it's like, oh, like Jodeci and all those type of bands she really loves. But you know, I had to introduce her to Lucero or Dawes, or, you know, it's like, oh, you need to check this out. You know, she just has no exposure to it whatsoever. And I think a lot of people, unless you have someone in your family that's gonna be like, oh, you need to listen to this.
Right.
It's what's on the radio and the radio channels that you pick.
Mhm.
You know.
You know
'Cause
what's
we're-
crazy is the kids nowadays, my daughter hears about new music through TikTok. Now I'm not on TikTok, but she's like, she knows I like Metallica. She's like, Dad, you like the song For Whom the Bell Tolls? I'm like, yeah. She heard that on TikTok.
That's awesome.
And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a funny way that kids discover music nowadays. It's not through the radio anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
but
it's kind of odd too that, you know, we live in an age where, you know, as just one individual, you have access to more technology and just more information and stuff. Yet it seems like to some degree that actually puts us more in our own little worlds and doesn't allow us to experience as much stuff as, you know, that, quite frankly, I think maybe back in the day, I think people had a little more of a desire to go search and find something new. Like, I don't think people were sitting around just going, I like the Beatles. The Beatles are great. I don't want to hear anything else. I'm not going to go see if there's this new band, this new whatever. I think that was just a thirst for what's new, what's next, what's different. But I think now everyone gets in their world and we get around the same people who like the same things. And if you're not like music freaks that you're hanging around, you're going to pretty much the same 20, 30, 40 bands are all you're going to hear. And it's all going to be in your little world.
right.
Yeah. Brian Reynolds is saying Devin Townsend tries new things frequently. I don't know if you're familiar with that Canadian artist.
Mm.
He kind of looks like Thomas Dolby. He's got a bald head, but it's like a kind of a metal sound to it. But I'm not going to pretend like I'm familiar with. I've heard some of his stuff, but there's almost like a theatrical quality to a lot of his music, and it's a big presentation. He's got elaborate album packages. I mean, he really kind of pushes the envelope in terms of sound and presentation. So yeah, that's a great example, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's getting a little late for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
That'll work. Tomorrow.
So yeah, I know we all have to, or you guys have to work. I'm actually going to an amusement park tomorrow
Oh man.
with my kids. Yeah.
I'm playing
Wow.
live. I'm playing live for my second graders tomorrow.
All right,
Sweet.
dude.
Nice. Is that the last day of school?
No, we go to school next week, but tomorrow is like our sort of grade level field trip to a local park. And some parents are going to be there, and they asked me if I wanted to play live. So I'm like, yeah, definitely. I'll play some stuff live. But
What are you going to play?
I'm going to do, I came out with a CD a while back of original children's music. So I'm going to play some of the stuff from there, but I'm going to throw in some stuff for the adults too. Like I think I'll do Proud Mary. Everybody loves John Denver, so I'll probably do Country Roads. So I'll throw in some stuff for the adults as well.
Angel of Death.
Angel of Death, yeah. Probably something off of Rembrandt Pussy
Agree
Horse
with
by
that,
the Butthole
yeah.
Surfers.
Fight fire with
Anthrax.
fire. Singing
Yeah.
for exile. Aftershock.
South of
Just-
Heaven.
I'll send you some.
Very cool.
All right, guys. Well, this is fun.
Yeah, thanks everybody
Always.
who watched and commented and participated. We'll be back next week, and maybe we'll talk about the Beatles, or we'll talk about the 60s. Maybe we can do a a discussion about 60s music in general and how music progressed, and look at some great crotch shot album covers.
That's an unusual cover there, Mr. Profi.
Yeah. Not going to be hanging on my wall anytime soon. But
Yeah, I would turn that one around.
yeah.
Well, it's the back of this album.
Okay, there you go.
You've shown it a little too much there, Chris.
Listen,
It's burned into my memory now.
It's a muscular crotch there.
I
Yeah.
never shy away from a good crotch shot. So,
I like
That's my philosophy.
I like big butts, and I cannot lie.
And on that note,
Yeah. All right,
Have a good
everybody,
one,
take
guys.
care. See you next week.
All right.